Roundtable. I'm your host, Josh Turner, and this is PRT. I think it says up there, Josh Turner at PRTpodcast.com, and right here, patreon.com/PRT podcast. Those are the coordinates. If you want to join the Patreon, we just sent out like almost a dozen packages. I think most everybody got those. I got the email alerts. I know if you guys have just joined, it says low audio. It's been a problem lately, the low audio.
It was at first, but it's fixed now.
Okay. Can everybody hear me good? Because the audio was a problem in a couple episodes, and I feel like we really wasted that because you have to turn the audio way up to hear me. I don't know what was going on with this. It was a cable or something that needed to be fixed. And I thought I gave you guys some pretty good information. And so, anyways, folks, if you want to join the Patreon, it's always appreciated. Donations on the super chats, they're not expected, but they're appreciated too. And tonight we're going to have a guest as per usual on Friday. It's usually Friday or it's Sunday. We have a guest. Conference is in a week. It's 1 week away, man. It's 1 week away, and everything is starting to happen now. I'm starting to have a lot of problems. Lots of issues because it's 1 week away. And people are like, oh, I didn't know it was Sunday, too. And I'm like, okay. I've been saying that for months, but yeah. So can't control what people do. You just got to hope. You just got to go with it, you know. Yeah, people are saying the audio is low. Yeah, several people saying that.
I turned you up.
Let's try it again, folks. Can you guys hear me? Because I don't know if is this microphone not working or what's going on here.
All right, they're saying it's
good. Is it good? Is that better? Because I mean, I hate that it's been low, you know, and I've gotten a lot of complaints. I don't want that to happen. It's too bad that that's happened. And I'm sorry, folks, if I'm a little preoccupied. I got some things going on here I'm not going to talk about. It's just personal stuff, man. I don't want to bore you with it. Just trying to do my best. Sometimes, no matter what you do, you can't please people. And certain people, you know, even those closest to you, no matter what you do, you can't please them. They will never be happy, ever. And that's what I'm dealing with right now. It's just this one person just keeps emailing me and just like it's unreal. It's like, dude, no matter what, you just you know, whatever, man. Oh man. A week from today is the conference. What else we need to talk about? I'm drawing a blank here.
You mentioned the Patreon yet?
Yeah, not the tiers, but
yeah, we got the Patreon. Patreon is patreon.com/PRT podcast. It's right there somewhere on the bottom of the screen here, somewhere here. We got a $10 through $40 through $40 tier. We're working on a $50 tier. You sign up for the $10 tier. After 3 months, you get a swag bag. If you want to skip that waiting period, you can sign up for any of the above tiers, and you'll get that swag bag immediately. You just send a message to us on Patreon saying, hey, my name is so-and-so. This is my shirt size, my mailing address. And the larger your tier, the larger your swag bag. But regardless, you're going to get more than your money's worth out of that bag. There's a bunch of really cool stuff. Books, hats, shirts, just... It just goes up and up depending on what tier you sign up for.
Are we wearing the same shirt?
I got dressed first, dude.
Yours is blue though, right?
No, mine's black.
Oh, mine's green. I thought yours looked green.
Oh no, mine's
yours
black.
Yours is green?
Yeah.
Don't look green at all.
It's a really dark green.
Very dark, yeah.
It's forest green.
You can't see the forest from the trees on that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, folks. Just under a lot of stress. A lot. Please pray for me. Pray for Anthony and Tony. Scorp, D, all of us need your prayers. We need prayers. we are definitely dealing with more than just a normal problem. People, I think, we just got some issues, man. I'm telling you. So there was a picture going around, and I'm going to discuss it a little bit. But I didn't. I'm sorry. I didn't even prepare. I didn't even look. There's a picture that I posted on the Paranormal Roundtable Facebook group, and is there a way to move this over so it doesn't take off the top of my
The
head?
camera?
No, where it says Josh Turner PRT Podcast.
Oh, yeah. Here. I'll just get behind the computer.
And just move it over so it doesn't take off the top part of my head here. And put the camera on you, Tony, for a second. Fix this.
Hey, Barton. Starscream. How you guys doing? Sugar Britches, Mickey G. Thank you for the Beth.
All right, I got it fixed.
T. Cutler. Looks like everybody's excited for next weekend.
Yeah, we're gonna get started here shortly. It's just that a lot of stuff came up today, and you only have so much time in a day, and if you don't, you have to pick and choose how you use it, and we couldn't use it the way we should have used it. Things just got in the way. We usually spend most of the day before these live streams getting ready and preparing and going over things, but a bunch of stuff for work and other stuff got in the way. But we're not gonna disappoint y'all. Wolf's always got plenty of stuff loaded, plenty of stuff to share with y'all, and me and Tony are here to be well, I'm here to be the smart commentator, and he's here to be the smart aleck commentator.
Alex not here.
See what I mean?
What
is that?
I think you were talking about.
Nope.
No, that's the short bear, or the short.
Bear.
Yeah.
Active in the group, you know that.
I'm gonna try and pull it up on my Facebook. If Facebook just keeps logging me out like
Yeah,
15
that's
times a
to
day.
Everybody. All right, here we are, folks. I don't want this to be a bad show or a bad day. Everybody's here to so
Yeah.
we have a guest that's
That
going to
post.
come on, and it's not fair to him if I'm not prepared and not ready. I'll be real honest. We were going to cancel the show about an hour before, and I just didn't feel like it was appropriate, especially going into the conference and everything that's going to happen. We are going to try and stream the conference. I will give you a definitive on that on Sunday. I just haven't even had a chance to call back Christopher Jordan and tell him, hey, that we're going to do this or that. So much going on. If the world is the way it is, if people would act appropriately and just do right, things would go right. But people you can't make people just behave. You know what I mean? It is what it is. People are going to act the way they're going to act, and they're going to act out, and they're going to do what they're going to do. And I think some people do it just so they can, yeah. So the book sales, folks. The Dogman is outselling the Bigfoot book 2-1. No surprise there. But I think the Bigfoot book was a better piece of work. I don't know. I liked it. I mean, I liked writing it. I'd like for more people to go and read it and then leave me a review. A lot of people are reading the Werewolf Dogman book, and then they're going and reading the Bigfoot book, and then they're getting back with me on it. I would say if I put a percentage on it, it would probably be 60-40 people are saying that I did the Bigfoot book was a better book. I think it's because of the way that it was written, the amount of stories I put into the Dogman book, and they weren't as lengthy and didn't get into it as much as the Bigfoot book did. But when it comes to the Bigfoot subject, you have to put your best foot forward because there's so much work out there when it comes to Bigfoot. There's a lot of work that's been done, and so I just you have to encompass everything, and like so these witnesses in the Bigfoot book, just we went through and talked about everything that they had going on. You know, you know, I'm sorry that I'm not I'm fumbling for words here. I'm on my
Welcome to my world. That's me every day.
not on my A game tonight. I just you would think some people would just like people are nasty and cruel. You know what I mean? They really are. Shade Viking, thanks for that donation. It's just like they, if they sense a weakness or they think, they will pounce and they want to take you behind the woodshed and give you a whipping. And I'm talking like there's people that are just waiting for their opportunity, but you don't expect it to come from people close to you. And when it does, it really stings, especially when they know full well everything that's going on and they still choose to do what they do. I've never understood that. I've always been one of those people that believes that if those closest to you should be more understanding and willing to, but they're just not. They're not. Some people want to see the world burn and they want to see you burn. And when they're mad, being angry doesn't give you a carte blanche to just F the world, and destroy those closest to you because you're angry. Because anger is it should be a temporary state of mind, a temporary way of being. It shouldn't last, and it shouldn't supersede your logic circuits. People who do that, who just flip out, and they don't have any control over themselves because of their anger, and then later on they're like, "Oh, it's mad." Like that's no reason to burn the house down. But you deal with that, and I've been dealing with it my whole life. Mentally unstable people who just don't, and it's just life, and work is hell. It's putting us through the ringer, and we're trying to get this conference done, and we have people, at the 11th hour, oh, can I get a refund? I'm not going to go. And I'm like, I understand you have extenuating circumstances or whatever. Clearly, on the Eventbrite thing, they're not going to give us our money back. Okay, it says it on there, no refunds. And if I do give you refunds out of the kindness of my heart, and I just can't really do anything till after the conference, and you have people that backed out of the conference, at the last minute. Just like a few days ago, luckily we had somebody just step up and say, yeah, I'll do it. Because, we did such a good job last year that a lot of people want to be a part of what's going on this year. It's their loss. They chose to just back out and then act like they didn't do anything wrong, It's like, no, man. I forgive you. I forgive anybody who does anything to me. You should. That's what we're supposed to do. Forgive and forget, right? And I try my best to forget. But when it comes back around, yeah, I'll remember. Okay? And the thing that gets me is, when you go to these other conferences, you had no problem going to all these other conferences. Then at the last minute, what are you trying to squeeze me or something? Then you just say, oh, well, I'm not going to go. Well, then don't go. Because we have an all-star lineup, and there was a couple people who just really rubbed me the wrong way. And people are going to go, oh, he's complaining again. And then that brings me to my next point before I bring my guest on. I did an impromptu show last Friday or Saturday. I didn't have to be up here doing that. And I told a bunch of stories, talked a bunch of stuff out. Who backed out? It's not important. You'll see that their name is not on the new banner. Go look them up and you'll figure it out. So there were 6 people altogether that dropped out. 3 of them, I think, had pretty good excuses. One of them, I asked her not to be, I uninvited her. And since then, I've been getting all kinds of like horrible, nasty, messages from people telling me that person has said this and said that. And they went on a crusade, which is why I gave them the boot. And then after giving them the boot, because I wouldn't do something immoral, they went around and tried to get all my speakers to not go to my conference because this person, she's that kind of person. If you don't have moral, fortitude, moral fiber, so they've told people that it's going to be their life's mission, her and her henchmen, because she's got a couple henchmen, really, honestly, to take me down, to destroy me, to make my life hell. And so far, I've got so much other stuff making my life hell that I can't even pay attention to that person making my life hell. So all I can say to you, lady, is stand in line, okay? Because, I have clients making my life hell. I have lawyers and other things making my life hell. But I'm about to open up another lawsuit, and it's going to be a defamation lawsuit, and it's going to be against you because you won't stop. And you went around to about, a dozen people trying to recruit them to take a stand against me by not going to my conference. Take a stand for what? For what? Against his morals? This guy did not want to go after a person, that you say threatened you and you had no proof whatsoever. And then you condemned us because we offered this person whose child has cancer, we offered to give them our donations, and that just sets you off to the moon. Maybe you can remote view that. Maybe you can remote view the moon. Yeah. Because, anyway, that's the kind of person they are. All right? And then you got Mr. Yeah, I'm a therapist over there. He's doing his thing. So yeah, I'm stressed out a little bit, but that's the least of it. I got a guy that's been threatening me for the past 2 hours, and he threatens me, then he stops, and then he threatens me, then he stops, and then I got a family member, like I said, that's just gone off the rails. Not my brother, but somebody that's just decided that they're just gonna take a big dump right before the conference and not do what needs to be done. So that's what's going on. But I don't want to stress you out. I'm just trying to tell you and be real and tell you where I'm coming from. I don't want you to think that, it has anything to do with you, the audience or the listeners. But I got a bunch of nasty negative comments, not a bunch, but a few. And this one guy, he was just all over, jumping around, acting a fool, mad because, I don't know. I did an impromptu show last Saturday, and he said that there weren't enough stories or whatever. I'm going to say this again. I've said it before. I am not a damn story machine, okay? I spend enough of my life reading these people's stories to get them to you. I don't feel like I don't feel compelled on a night that I'm not even supposed to be up here. That tonight I'm supposed to be up here because I say I'm supposed to be up here. That's when I'm up here. Sunday I'll be up here. I try to come hell or high water. But those little nasty comments in the YouTube section, whenever when you say these things, they're not going to go unchallenged, man. Okay, I'm telling you right now because that's bullcrap. I sat up here and talked for like 3-4 hours telling you stories, and this person has the nerve to sit there and say that they were cleaning jewelry or some crap. They were some mindless activity that requires them listening to something. So listen to me, and I just wasn't pumping out enough stories for them. Well, too bad. Too freaking bad. Okay. Because when we tell a story, what do? We go around the horn and we talk about that story. And we try to go a little deeper into the story and give you more.
Yeah, we're human beings who use our brains, the brains that God gave us. So, if you want a story just read, spoon-fed to you, you got two options. You can go read a book, or you can go get like an AI robot to read a story to you, since if you don't want to read yourself. So, but we have brains, and we like to think about things. You may not understand that. That's your prerogative. But yeah, my uncle is not here to just spoon feed you exactly what you want like you're a little baby. I'm sure there's other channels for you. This is not the channel for you. That's fine. If you don't want to listen, that's fine. We have plenty of other people much smarter and just who contribute much more than you do. So
Yeah, just
nobody
make it
cares.
easier for us and just leave. I mean,
Yeah, just leave.
all
Just
this
go. We're
complaining
not
is
even-
just not
and
helping.
they feel the need to do it over and over again.
Yeah.
It's just like, and it happens, but consistently with some people. And then there's people that'll be behind them. I know what you're saying, man. I get it. If you know what they're saying, go with them. Go with them. I don't need you. Drop off right now. Go. Because I'm not up here to just spit out stories. I do that. But, you know, when we tell a story, the reason we do that is because whenever I go to another channel, which is very rare, but I do it sometimes, and if I have a minute in my day and they're talking, I want to hear what they're saying. I want to hear the talking points. And if they're discussing an encounter that somebody had, I want to know the details of it. Like, I like it when somebody tells the story that somebody sent them, or that person tells a story, and the host does his job or her job and actually goes in deep and starts talking with this witness about the possibilities of what it could be. And, you know, that's what you're supposed to do. That's what you're supposed to do. You know, there are people, though, that they just tell the story, and that's great. That's all they do. And then you're just left to sit there and go, oh, well, geez, you know, I guess I draw my own conclusion here, you know. It's like I'm reading one of those books where you just make your own ending or whatever. You don't really know. I mean, and I'm not like, it's not like we're going to discover, you know, the all the answers, but at least you get some kind of, like, how do you say it? Like, you kind of get to the bottom of it a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, you know, where did this happen at? You know, okay, well, in that area, there's this and there's that, and who knows what that could be. And then it helps if you have a knowledge with other stories, because you can go, hey, there's a thread there, and let's talk about what this other person may have seen in that area, and blah, blah, blah. That's called being a good host. You know, not just, you know, you tell a story that somebody sent you and then that's it. You're like, well, next story, you know, and then you tell that story, and then there's supposed to be, like Catania says, I like live discussion. Yeah, you're trying to discuss these things. You know, that's the issue. And I had a bunch of stuff lined up, folks, and I left the house and didn't even get to, you know, I'm just so frazzled. I didn't even get to get it looked at, or I didn't even. So ridiculous what's going on. But I apologize, okay, folks. I don't even. I know I got some stories lined up for Sunday, and you'll have those stories, and I just wish people would just meet me halfway in the sanity department. I just wish they could do that. So Sunday, what I'm going to do, because the conference is coming up on next Friday, what do we have Tuesday in the chamber? What's coming up for them on Tuesday?
Tuesday we have, what was that second episode we recorded? Is it another Dogman episode?
It's a paranormal potluck, I'm pretty sure.
Is it?
Yeah, because we had,
We talked about the...
Okay, so so
'cause
there's
that
going
was
to be
the
a
second one we
paranormal
recorded.
potluck coming up, and then we have Sunday. We're going to tell some Dogman stories. I got some pretty good ones that I went through and found, and got a couple of them just by kind of lurking around. I say lurking around, sounds all just lurking around in a group. It was just kind of like waiting. I was just kind of sitting there, and somebody was talking about a story they had, so I just reached out to them, and they were like, "Yeah, they told me." So that was pretty cool. I had another one. What was the one, Anthony? A person from New Mexico claims to have seen one of these things attack somebody. So me and Anthony were going over that one a few days ago. That was probably, it was Monday. But I got to find it. I sent the notes to Scorp. We went over it. Where is that? Did I tell you guys? Did I talk about that the guys that were training the Belgian Malinois? And they threw the ball against the wall, and when it bounced up, If you've heard this in
Yeah,
the
I believe you did.
yeah, and it disappeared. Yeah, that was crazy, dude. Okay. Yeah. Because I just saw that one right now, and I was like, I think I told that one, but that was a really crazy story. Hold on one second, folks. I'm trying to look for one because I wanted to ask my guest that's coming on in a few minutes here. I don't know. Yeah, I got some pretty good stories for this.
Thank you to 6,000 people that saw our last show. It was pretty cool.
What is it?
On Tuesday.
Yeah.
Glitches and
We didn't get as many views on that show as we usually do on our shows. That show, if you haven't listened to Tuesday's episode, you need to go and listen to
It's
it
a
and
good
check
one.
it out. I enjoyed going over those cases too. Those were really neat. Those were like, thank you for that, Scorp. Thank you. He just sent my notes to me. It's a good thing to have a friend. But yeah, whatever that was, it went. I'm trying to think of the one. I think there was like one where the guy was in Korea.
Yeah, when he was eating his noodles.
Yeah, that was so freaking weird, dude. And I also heard back from the girl who, I want to say girl because she's not a girl, she's a woman, but her mother who was in China when she went underground. She was abducted.
Yeah.
Okay, so I got a little bit more information about that, and I'll tell you this before my guest comes on really quickly, and then we can talk about that after this because that's fresh in my mind. She had not just her, but the village where they lived and the area where they lived, they actually had a few more people that it actually happened to. It wasn't just her. It wasn't a one-time thing where they went and got her and they took her down. It was like once in a blue moon there would be somebody that would go missing, and a few of these people didn't return. And so it was crazy. And because there was a precedent that had happened before, and when they go looking for these people, the official stance of is like, well, they just went missing, whatever. They're not going to entertain the idea that there's some sort of weird race of beings underneath the earth grabbing people, because who the hell wants to believe that? So the officials in China were not in a hurry to say, hey, this is what's happening. It was really weird. It went really deep down this rabbit hole of like, so she said that it didn't only happen to her mother, but it happened to her mom. It happened to her mom's friend, who was a few years older than, or her mom's sister's friend, who was a few years older than her. She didn't. Her mother wasn't like really close to her, but she ended up dying of cancer. Now, what was really interesting about that and sad was that she died of cancer 6 years after she came back to the surface. Pretty sure that's where they were at. But she always said that she was in a dream. Like the whole time she was there, she thought she was dreaming. But that's obviously not what was going on. She had been abducted and was held by these beings. But she actually, now I got the information from this young lady whose aunt opened up to her about what her best friend, what happened to her. And she told an incredible story of a race of reptilians that she was basically the race of beings that took her down into this underground labyrinth, because she remembers going down into this spiral, which is a little more than the other woman. She was taken down like in a bubble, like a sphere. But there was like a spiral that she went circling down, and she remembers going down into this, underground world. And what ended up happening, that original race of beings, where she was at, they had some sort of like, I guess, trade or something going on with this other group.
Yeah.
And she ended up being like sold, I guess, like kind of like a slave,
Oh yeah, that kind of ties into the point I brought up the other day about like how the inner Earth is like it's it could be like a compartmentalized thing and not just one like homogenous race of beings.
Yeah, it's not. Although there are legends. Let me tell you something else, folks. When my guest is done tonight, stick around because I'm going to get into something I read, and me and Anthony, and he jogged my memory about this. And I looked high and low all over the house for it. It was a book I read that I looked for the name of it, and I don't even know if that's the right name that I'm looking for. But it was called Greek Myths of the World, or let's see, you got the whole Mandela effect that just completely distorts everything and convolutes and obfuscates everything. But it was so weird. It was a book I read when I was like in my late teens. I think I was like 18, and my neighbor was a bookworm. He was a video game nerd and a bookworm. That's all he did was read. He lives below me, and he played video games. And he went to work, came home. That was it. Didn't do anything else. Like that was his whole life. And so it was really crazy. He was telling me about this stories that he had read in this book. Years later, I reconnected with him, and it was right after the game God of War came out. And it was really weird because he had let me borrow this book, and it was like it was. I want to say that Greek myths was in the title.
So I found one book called The Complete World of Greek Mythology.
Well, that might have been it. I don't know. But the book that I was thinking, though, was like World Myths and Legends from, it was called, it was some British, it was a really, originally, I think it was like a book that was written in some other European country, but it said translated to English for the first time.
Oh,
And it was an old book. It was a reprint. And the original print copy of the book, I think, was from 1876, if I remember correctly. And the person that wrote it talked in the book about a story. And I've read so many books; some of them are out of print, and it's something that I've talked to about with some of my colleagues too. Like we'll read books, especially David and Nick Redford and David Weatherly, and we'll read books. And we read so many books. We're kind of book nerds, that they'll be out of print or you won't be able to find them anymore. But it was like something complete mythology from Greek to Norse or something like that, or the Greeks to the Norsemen or something along those lines. But I looked all over on Amazon, and I saw a bunch of different books that were similar, but I don't think those were it. The point is, though, is this guy, I lost touch with him, but because the first God of War came out a long time ago, and that was around the last time I saw him, and he was working at a convenience store because he used to work at a convenience store by our apartments, and so he got in touch with me, and he's like, "Hey, do you remember the book I lent you?" And he had called me because my brother ran into him and he gave him my phone number, and he was like, "Yeah." I told him, "Yeah, I remember the book, whatever." And he said, "Well, they have a video game out now that's about that, very similar." So then Anthony reminded me because we were talking about Pinocchio and we were talking about Peter Pan, and we were talking about the true meanings behind those movies. And what and I'm not going to say the name of the company, but what they do though, that particular company, that big giant corporation, what they do though, they take already written myths and legends and they kind of jumble them together and make something, and but a lot of those things are based on some really freaky stuff, like Peter Pan. Pan is literally a god, a demigod, a little g, from way back in the Greek history. And so I'll get into a little bit of that after we talk. We'll talk about that, and I'll bring that up to you guys, and so you guys can tell me what you think, because it is freaky stuff. And I remember that book, and I'll get into the whole thing. But first, I got to call my guest and get him on, and then we'll reconvene. Just remind me what we're talking about, and because my brain is a little right now. I've just got a lot going on, folks. I am just so frazzled. But I definitely want to talk about that. So, in my notes here, my buddy just gave them to me, and thank you, Scorpion, for that. So, I appreciate it. Way to look out, and my brother too. Appreciate you guys both. Okay, so let's make this call. Why is it doing that? Wow. Just gave me a massive eye headache. So I better put these on. There it is. So let's make this.
Hello, Josh.
Hey, Gary, how you doing?
I'm doing
Can you hear me?
fine, thank you. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. I mean, yeah, I'm okay. How are you?
Hold on 1 second. Let me. I also have on the YouTube, and I'm getting the
The
replay
feedback.
on it.
Mm-hmm.
There. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. All right. I just had to mute the YouTube because it was playing both on Facebook and on the YouTube.
Okay. So you get folks. This is Gary Brand, and he has a show. Gary, do you want to say hello to the audience?
Well, hello, all the paratroopers. My name is Gary Brand. I'm one half of Within the Mist podcast, a show where we explore the dark, shadowy places of cryptids, ghosts, and other mysteries. We present a weekly show about different topics, tell the different stories of them, and basically are here for entertainment and education.
Yeah. And your podcast. This is really loud. Hold on 1 second, Gary. The sound coming back into my from my voice is echoing into my headset.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Gary. We've had some
Oh,
issues.
no,
And
like I
it's
said, I was having the same problem.
I was literally having to contact the authorities like an hour or two before I came on because I had somebody threatening me. So, yeah.
Yeah, actually,
So-
I've been watching the watching the YouTube from the beginning. So yeah, it sounds like a rough night.
It's been a rough week. Been a rough week, very hectic. But you know what? You put yourself in those positions, and you got to take whatever comes with it. That's what I believe. I don't believe in it's like, if you're going to be in the public eye, you have to be ready for the cuckoo. It's going to happen, and there's people who don't see the world correctly, and there's a lot of that. Unfortunately, you guys do good work though, and as you get bigger, you'll see. Hopefully not. I don't wish that on you, but
Oh, great! Something to look forward to.
I don't want to jinx you or curse you, brother. You were one of the nicest guys out there too. You and Rye Voss, just really, a lot of good friends. I have a lot of good friends, and I know a lot of people who are doing this. But you guys are really good people. You're nice people, very pleasant to talk to and work with. So tell us about your channel. Tell us what you do, and tell us how you and your wife do what y'all do.
Well, absolutely. I guess I can start with how we began. It was during the COVID pandemic lockdown, and my wife and I usually try and get out a great deal. We live in Central Florida, so the House of Mouse, Universal, SeaWorld, there was so much to always do. And locking us in a house together kind of, got a little difficult. And we decided that, we both have an interest. She's focused on ghosts. I'm a former veterinary technician, so I always like the creature side. So we started putting together these little stories and, the research that we put together and started, doing it as just to see what it would happen from. And today we just recorded our 100th episode.
Oh, wow.
So it's continued on since then.
What is your 100th episode? It's got to be a special one. If it's the 100th, what is it about?
Yeah,
What is that one?
we did the Loch Ness Monster.
Oh wow, I've never done the Loch Ness Monster, but my friend Ken is over there in Scotland doing something about the Loch Ness Monster. I don't know. It's supposed to be the largest hunt, I guess, in the history of the world or whatever. And so he was all stoked about it and whatever. Maybe I wasn't supposed to say anything. I don't know. He's over there looking for it. But he'll be back in time for the conference. We got a lot to do when he comes back. I was like, dude, you leave me hanging here. Because I got a lot of overflow going on with the conference and everything else. Are you going to make the conference, Gary?
No, unfortunately not. I really wanted to, especially since my brother lives there, but my truck broke down, and for like 5 weeks, I pretty much wasn't able to work. So I'm a little
Oh, man.
behind.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely want to come to next year's. So keep
Yeah.
the invitation open for me, please.
Not going to have a next year.
No?
What I'm doing next year is just going to be focusing on writing and then just doing the show. And of course, I have to get my business. My business has been kind of lagging a little bit here lately. I've been having some issues, and so trying to keep it together, and I can't do that. And with the conference, you have to promote it so much, and I get a lot of people that involved with the show, and they're just like, hey, you're always talking about the conference because you got to promote it. And I don't want to have to do that. I don't want to have to sit here and talk about the conference constantly. I just want it to happen. And, it's like at this point, I want it to happen, and then I'm ready for it to be behind me. It's just
Ready to move on to other things.
Yeah, because I don't want to keep talking about it. So it's just like I'm happy it's happening, and I'm looking forward to it because last year was so much fun, and I'm gonna have a blast this year. But I'm just gonna do it, and then I got to get right back on the horse, and I got to get and even now, like tomorrow night, we're gonna have to record either tonight or tomorrow night for the Tuesday show for when we come back. So, folks, there will be a show the day after Labor Day, and we're going to be ironing out everything tomorrow about how we're going to do the stream, because we are going to make it to where you can purchase a stream. We're pretty sure, 90% sure. We think we can do it. It just depends on the electricity there and how it's set up. But my AV guy, he's pretty sure, and that's Christopher Jordan from Curious Realm. And if that works out, then great. We'll stream it. And it should go off without a hitch, hopefully, and so we'll give everybody the details on Sunday. So let me get to you though, Gary. Let me ask you a question. When you guys started doing this, and you said your wife was on the ghost side of it, and you were on the cryptid side of it, that's how you were telling me.
Yes.
Yeah. Why is that?
Well, for her, she kind of always grew up watching horror movies and so forth. So she always preferred the ghosts, the what happens to us after we pass away. I kind of always focused on trying to discover something that is believed in, and has evidence of, but it just hasn't had, the concrete proof yet. And so we just started telling each other stories, and it developed into, hey, we can do this, for a larger audience. I mean, I learn new things every day. In fact, I was doing a little bit of research for today's show because I know you do a lot of Dogman. And in fact, I learned that the Dogman doesn't like tuna, but Catman do.
So how did that come about? How did you figure that out?
Well, I have a book coming out October 1st, and it's called the Dad Jokes for the Paranormal Dads, and Dogman is part of it. And the joke goes that the Dogman doesn't like tuna, but Catman do.
Catman. Okay, I get it. I got a question though for the audience, and don't, you can't cheat, folks. Do you know where Kathmandu is? The city Kathmandu? Does anybody actually know? Do you know, Anthony?
Mm-mm.
Nobody? Let's see.
No.
We give you a couple seconds here. Somebody. Nepal. There you go. Yeah, somebody says. Yeah, way to go. Look at the big brain on Matt. All right, folks. Yay, Matt. He got it quick, too. So if he looked it up, looked it up pretty fast. I'll give you a hat, Matt. Just send me your address and information. We'll send you a Paranormal Roundtable hat as soon as we get back from the conference. That's right, Nepal. Kathmandu is actually, back in the 60s and 70s, it was a very popular place for people to go for spiritual enlightenment. And I actually got a story from a woman who she describes herself as an old hippie She's like 82 years old, and she looks like she's 60. I mean, it's crazy. She's been a vegetarian for most of her life, but she spent some time in Kathmandu, and she claims that she went through a portal. And literally, she didn't credit being a vegetarian to her health. She claims that she became younger from going to this portal, and then she began to go back to Kathmandu every like 10 years, and she would walk back through it because she found it. And it's a place of spiritual enlightenment. There's a whole story behind it. But anyway, let me ask you a question, Gary. So, with your wife doing the ghost stuff, and then you doing the monsters, what do you think? Do you think it's all connected?
Most definitely. I think a lot of the energies that goes on, it can be found in both parts. There's always talk about, case in point, the one that marks the bridge between the paranormal and the cryptid for us has always been Mothman. I mean, where does Mothman really fit? Is he a cryptid? Is he a winged bird? Or is he an angel of death, a ghostly energy spirit? So you never really know which side of the coin some of these topics fit in on. In fact, Dogman, Bigfoot, there's talk about them being intradimensional. So where does the line really draw between the two? And I don't think there is one.
You know, it's. I think that what you're saying though, there isn't one, but there's so many people on both sides of that coin, and they're really two heads of the same coin, and they'll argue all day long.
Yes.
I have a friend, she's a ghost person, and she's like, it doesn't have anything to do with the Dogman. And I was like, Dogman spiritually, yes. And she's like, yeah, but there's a physical creature. And I was like, well, it can manifest as physical just like a ghost can. She was in a restaurant one time. She was in Florida. Gosh, don't tell me the name of the place. Is it Kissimmee? Is that the name of it?
Yes.
Kissimmee, Florida. Kissimmee. Yeah, and she went into a restaurant, and they saw an apparition. Her and her husband, full-on apparition. He was a non-believer, and the reason they knew it was an apparition is because they saw it walk through a wall. And her son thought it was funny. Like, he was just like, wow. He thought it was like a magic trick. He was like 5 years old. He didn't know any better. And then the dad was like, no, that's a demon, and it'll probably kill you. Then he began to cry, and so they put him in the car. I'm kidding.
You got to teach him young. Get him started.
You got to scare the crap out of him. No. Now you're going to have to go sit in the car while we eat dinner. See, Bobby, you never should have laughed and thought it was funny.
You don't do your homework, that thing's going to get you.
Yeah. And so it's negative, positive reinforcement.
Well, you look at skinwalkers, the Native Americans who use, magic and sorcery to change their shape from human to animals, to include dogs, wolves, birds, all types of creatures. So there's always that paranormal energy that even for creatures that are flesh and blood, there's always stories that connect it to more paranormal energies.
Mm-hmm. Another interesting thing, too, I don't know if you guys have looked into this, but ley lines, like Saratoga Lights in East Texas, they correspond, latitude corresponds to like Marfa, Texas. And so it's
my whole theory on the Dover Demon connects to ley lines, because the teenagers who all saw the Dover Demon, when they asked them to pinpoint it on a map, it actually went in a straight line, and they were discovering that it was parallel to a river. So there was a lot of theories that maybe there's a ley line that these Dover Demon was actually following, and that's where the teenagers found it. So a lot of times there are sightings that follow, lines that we don't actually see, but it's kind of weird how different things fall into shapes. Bermuda Triangle, Bridgewater Triangle, those kind of things. How ley lines might affect, the energy and or attract creatures or spirits.
And do you think that there's some sort of energy there that does that? Or do you think that it could be some sort of like jumping off points, like nexus or portals? Like, what is your opinion on that?
Well, consider it like a power line, and at some point that power line is going to have something that it's going to plug into or generate from. So if we get to the point where we can actually measure the magnetic strengths of ley lines, then maybe you can follow them to nexus points, like Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah. Skinwalker Ranch is an interesting one because I think that people talk about it being like an area of high strangeness, but I don't think that Skinwalker Ranch itself is even the epicenter of it. I really don't. I think that there's something there because there's several ranches in that area that are okay. Like we've talked about Hernandez Ranch,
Yeah.
but it runs close to this area known as Devil's Backbone, and that area is full of weirdness. So that would be like saying that their ranch is the epicenter of it. And I don't think it is. I just think that they have a lot of weird stuff that's happening there, but so do the Hitchens.
Well, I mean, Tony's doing a documentary on an adjacent property on that ranch.
Tony
as well.
Merkel, yeah. And so, yeah, to me, it just if you look at it like a lot of these weird hot spots that people talk about. I don't know how much work you've done on that, Gary, but it's so like you can't like actually put your finger on like this is where it's all coming from because it's an entire region, an entire area, like the LBL. It's a large region, and if you Dogman, people love to go out there and look for Dogman. Bigfoot people like to go out there and look for Bigfoot, but ghost people like to go out there and look for ghost, whatever. And then I got people who tell me that they've seen goblins out there in their caves. And one of the most interesting stories I've ever heard was somebody who saw a vampire, who claimed that they saw a vampiric creature out there. Which there was a story I just got recently, and I know this isn't the same person. So if you were the other person that gave me that said your dad had a vampire story from out there, please message me. Also, there was somebody who, hopefully you're listening tonight. We were looking for the source of this, and you guys said that whoever sent it said that it was it looked like a demonic toddler. Is that right, Anthony?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to just not to take away from what you're talking about, Gary, but I need to throw that out there while I'm remembering because these people had sent me these stories and they just got so far down on and I just didn't mark them off, and I didn't want to lose it.
I think that things that you and I do and other podcasts that do these kind of things, I think what we do is very important because I've discovered that every town has a woods where you don't go into because there's a monster in there, or there's a house that you don't go into because it's haunted, or they've seen lights in the skies. Well, these stories come and go, and then they get lost. And I think you and I, and people like us, we preserve those stories by doing these shows, and you're writing your books. I think that that's important that those stories get saved, because all you have to do is really prove one of them to be true, and then that gives evidence to all of them. And we'll lose that if those stories get lost.
Yeah, and right now I'm just worried because I have two different emails, and I went in and I checked my one email. Not recently. This was like a while back. But remember, Anthony, we had the y'all remember?
Yeah, we had the
DOS
original
Wolfman.
Gmail one.
Yeah, and so people that just start listening to the show, they'll go back and they'll send the email through that email address. And then some people, some of my colleagues have my regular personal email address. So whenever someone asks them, how to get a hold of me, they give them that email address. And so I have those two email addresses, and then I have the paranormal PRT podcast, which is right here, podcast.com email address. And so with all these email addresses, and so I was going through and I found a story from a fairly new listener from only about 2 months, and it was in the DOS Wolfman one, and they didn't know the PRT that we had changed it. And so it was just sitting in there, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And so I started reading, and it was pretty good. So I got to go through that. It is from a person who's a Native American, and they were giving their perspective on something that they saw when they were young. And it is now the third story I have been given about abduction from a skinwalker.
Wow.
So we have 3 of them now. One of them was a girl that worked at my friend's bar that just sat down. It was me and you, right, Tony? She just sat down and started telling us. She was Chickasaw, right?
Yeah.
Chickasaw. And she just started telling us. She's like, I was abducted by a skinwalker when I was a child. And then we were doing some research the other day with my friend Arash, who owns Spinners. That's the place she was working at. She's not an employee there anymore. But my friend, he has bought a piece of land out of a place near called Cistern. Cistern is like a little spot in the road, but he has a bar out there. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And we were looking on a map, and we were doing some research, and we found that there were several Bigfoot sightings at different times from there and Seguin to Lockhart, that whole area that we had gotten reports of, and that a friend of ours had told us about that used to work with us downtown. And he was from Seguin, and he gave us information from a friend of his that had seen, didn't know whether it was a Bigfoot or a Dogman, but it looked like something with a short muzzle. And so I told him, I said, dude, my friend Arash has been having some weird things happen out there. And I told him, I said, dude, you got Bigfoot on your property, which could be something else. I don't know. But he claims it's haunted too. See, now that's when you were talking about your wife doing the ghost thing and you doing, that's a perfect combination because you're going to cover all the bases like that. When he's telling me that there's a barn out there that he believes is haunted, and then we're getting stories of Bigfoot, and then he says, do you think there's anything out here that's, and I said, possibly, let me look into it. And so when we started going back and looking in the archives, and then we looked at the map, we're like, yep, there it is. And there are some encounters that people have had. Now, put the link to the conference show here, whatever. Mm-hmm. Do you do any Bigfoot or Dogman, you yourself, Gary, or is it mostly just kind of like, like how much do you do? Like, what do you do?
Well, I live in Florida, so for us, the big one is the skunk ape.
Mm-hmm.
So we have gone down to the Everglades and to Green Swamp and done a bunch of walkthroughs for that. Tried to, seen some different structures and, heard the whooping and the tree banging, but I've never gotten to where I could actually see a print or a hair sample or anything like that. Over the years, I've come to realize that pretty much I don't think my job in this field is as a researcher. I think of myself more as an archivist. I collect the stories, I preserve the stories, I put them together so that they get out to the public so that they hear it, and then they realize that they're not alone and they're willing to share their stories. So maybe I'll never find the skunk ape. I won't be that guy, but I will be the one that supports the people looking for him. And I will be spreading their stories to keep more and more eyes open to the wildlife.
Yeah. Well, that's important what you do because, people always like make a big deal out of those or boots on the ground, whatever. Yeah, but if you don't have people who are keeping track of all this information, or if you're not writing your boots on the ground, but you're not writing books and keeping or finding information, and then relaying it, that's another thing. I mean, I've done a little bit of everything. I've been, I don't claim boots on the ground because I think that there are some actual real people out there that do that, and they go full tilt. Hellbent Holler comes to mind, and they're very big on what they do, and they're good at what they do. So you got some people that just go, they go out there and they actually do it, like my friend Nick Valenti from the IDP. Those people I consider to be true boots on the ground. But for a while there, everybody was like, I'm boots on the ground. I'm like, no, you're not, dude. You're just walking around. Like you're not, your feet are on the ground, but you're like standing behind the, the Best Buy,
Or in your backyard, basically.
Yeah, and you're walking around your backyard or your green belt behind your house. We had literally had a guy email us, and this is where it really ticked me off. He was making like little videos of himself, and he sent them to me, and he goes, you need to put me on your show. And I'll call him Dave. It's not his name, but I'm not trying to be mean, but he was very adamant with us. And we were like, okay, well, show me what you got. And so he showed us a little clip of himself walking through the woods. Okay, I recognized immediately it was the Greenbelt down in South Austin, right there by Campbell's Hole. And I'm like, dude, I used to go swim. Like, okay, yes, that is possible. There could be something out there. I've never had anybody tell me they saw anything out there, but you know, it's kind of wild. But there's a lot of people living out there, and I'm just like, then he's like boots on the ground, you know, and I'm like, okay. So when I didn't put him on the show, he came after me and was like, he goes, I gave you an opportunity to get on the ground floor of my new show and come out. And he went around telling people, like a few other researchers that I was friends with, who thank God didn't give him the time of day, because the guy seemed kind of off his rocker. But he, you know, I had to block him. But he said that he was to get on the ground floor of his new show, and that he offered to take me out into the woods, which he never did. He just told people he did. Because the woods that he was going to were literally like right behind where I used to work. And I was like, wow, I could have just walked over there and found Bigfoot. Oh, cool. You know, like, hello. And he tried to make it out like it was all wild and untamed. And while when I saw the clip, I said, that's Campbell's Hole, dude. What is he doing? Like, it's like right there. People go swimming there in the summer, you know. I'm like, what are you doing? This is not, you're not, you know. And so I asked him, I said, hey, I know where that's at. So then he sent me another clip of an area that's down past a place called Slaughter Lane. Now, Slaughter Lane used to be very wooded and whatever, but when I recognized those spots, I was like, dude, this isn't, you could like see people walking their dogs, you know what I mean? Like, not on his video, but like you could, you know, to me, that's not boots on the ground. To me, that's just a guy who wanted to be, you know, and so I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if he started his channel or not, but that kind of set me off. I was just like, dude, come on. You know,
It's the fame without the work.
yeah. And they're stealing, you know, like people that actually do some work, you know, and so yeah, and just because you do what you do and I do what I do, they do what they do, doesn't mean that anybody's any more important than the next guy. We all have our job and our niche. Now, I do a little bit of boots on the ground, but I just don't go around talking about it or call it that. But for the books, like I had to go and visit all of these places where these people saw these encounters. And I'm not going to lie, that one area by the bridge is very creepy. You know, it's by Mustang Creek. And I had to, you know, it's a creepy place. I mean, it's a place where you would expect a monster to be. So you're kind of looking around, you know, like, ugh, you know. And that particular case actually happened to one of my distant cousins in my hometown. I put it in my book. But when you go down in there, it's creepy. I mean, like it's a creepy place, and you have to walk down in there and just. But more than anything, I would be worried about is the ticks, because there was a guy showing a video of him out hunting. And when he came back, he was just covered in like these small ticks, and of course Lyme disease. And so people who do go out there and do that, you know, that is an ever-present danger. But I just prefer, if I didn't have to not do it. I mean, but we do have to go do it sometimes.
I
Oh,
like the way you put
definitely.
it too. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt.
No, you're
Uh,
fine.
Yeah, I was just saying, I like the way you put it too, that you see yourself as more of an archivist. It's a very a humble title, but it's important because and somebody in our live chat pointed it out. I think a listener by the handle of Nike Snow said something to the effect of it's important to remember that most of recorded history is due to people like yourself, and you know, but people like Wolf, people who just gather information and pass it on, archive it and pass it on for future generations to use and learn from. You know, that's just as important as anything else. If not for that, we wouldn't have recorded history at all, and then we would have no idea of our past.
Mm-hmm. And thank you
Well, I
for the
wouldn't call it,
donations.
yeah, I wouldn't call it completely humble, because it's gotten to the point now that every time we watch a horror movie, and every horror movie has this trope, you know, they always have to call the expert. You know, the guy who works in the museum, the guy in the library, you know, the creepy
Yeah.
old guy with all of his books. And my wife will always point out, that's you, babe. That's you.
Yeah.
You're the one. You're the one they're gonna call when they need to know about this monster
Very specific
demon
niche.
from
Yeah.
1,000 years ago.
You're the guy that
Every horror
shows up
movie
in the
has that guy.
yeah, you're the guy that shows up and the main character says, "I got a guy. I got a guy."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the guy with the book.
Yeah. You come through the door and If you had glasses on, you take them off all dramatically. My God.
What do we have here? Yeah. If we give the alien a cold, that's your job. That's good though. That you own it. You earn it. That's what you're. And I was getting attacked by people saying, "Oh, you're not the boots on the ground, whatever." I'm like, first of all, they don't really know what I am because I don't go around telling people what I do. And somebody left like a review on one of my books. They said, "This man has been invited by many researchers," and I'm like, "No, I haven't. The only person who's ever invited me was Barton. That one guy here in Austin said he did, but he never did. He didn't offer it to me. He didn't offer to take me anywhere but Campbell's Hole." I'm like, "I've been there, going there for 20 years and swimming. Why would I need to have your invitation to go? Okay, let's go down to the local swimming pool and let's go jump in. I mean, like, let's go to Barton Springs. I mean, come on."
It's like someone going in your house and be like, "This is the bathroom. This is this is your bedroom where you sleep."
The backyard, it's a little overgrown. I consider that to be jungle. But it's pretty ridiculous because like they bash on people like you and me, and it's not even like without us though the information wouldn't even be there. I mean, like you are performing a task that everybody it's and at times people lose sight of that. They're like it's not one or the other. You got to have everybody to make the assembly line run.
And I think I've made some great contacts with that. I mean, we work a lot with Feeling Paranormal. They're stationed here in Tampa/Orlando, Florida, and they are basically ghost investigators. They have all the gear, all the equipment and stuff, and they invite us to go out there with them. And they're very good at doing the technical part. And I do very well talking to the people of the area. So I get all the stories for them and they get all the actual physical evidence. And then we have friends with Mid-Florida Bigfoot organization, and they go out every weekend and they're investigating, and it's great to pull together all their stories. So it's important to also have the connections with people who do the ghost hunting, people who do the walking into the swamp areas. And I enjoy it.
Brett Loffer just made a point. He said maybe he was the mystery reviewer because you said you're from Tampa. One of the people that reviewed my book and bashed it was like, I don't think they read it. They just said, "Oh, it's full of grammatical errors." They didn't read the book. They just said that, and then but they said they were from Tampa, Florida. Like that's all we know. We don't know who it is, but wouldn't
Well,
be
we
you.
do now.
We know it was you, Gary.
That's why we got you on the show.
We were here to ambush the archivist. We knew you were after me, dude.
It's ambush journalism.
That's ambush
Well,
journalism.
actually, I haven't received mine yet. I've ordered it, but it hasn't come in yet.
Well, make sure you put a good review on there from Tampa because my favorite football team next to the Cowboys is the Buccaneers.
Well, I'm technically in Orlando, so it'll be a review from Orlando.
Oh, okay. There you go. But yeah, it's crazy when you were talking about the skunk ape. Let me ask you, what do you know about that particular cryptid? Because I know the basics, but I don't know a whole lot about it.
Okay.
And I can't even recall if I've gotten a story. It has a
long history, and some of the connections with it might surprise you. In fact, the original indigenous tribes that lived here in Florida would talk of the Shell tribe, and these were in another Indian tribe that existed in Central Florida that were so savage that the tribes that would talk to the Europeans warned them of these people, and it got so bad that they would hide in the forest and they could never be seen, and they were considered monstrous. So even as far back as that. Now, here's an interesting point, is that the reason Ponce de Leon, the man who was looking for the Fountain of Youth, says it is in Florida is because when he arrived, he met tribesmen, Native American tribesmen, who were over 6 foot tall, huge guys, monstrous guys. And he believed that the only way these people could be this size is because of the Fountain of Youth. So there has always been theories that there's been an offshoot of humanity in Florida, and it may be connected to the waters, to a Fountain of Youth type thing here. But my theory more is that it is an offshoot of apes. The skunk ape is less like Bigfoot and more like an orangutan,
Yeah, that's
in
what I
that
thought.
it is shorter with long arms, it's wider across, and it is able to move through the wetlands easier than any Bigfoot could. How it got there, we really don't know. One thing that I have heard rumors of is that when Europeans were trading goods to Florida, St. Augustine being the oldest city in the United States, a lot of these ship captains would go to Africa and they would take monkeys and apes as pets, as mascots for their ships. Well, we all know that having a chimpanzee or an orangutan as a pet on a ship is a very bad idea. So a lot of the times when they came to the Florida and these things, they would just set them loose. So who knows how many of these primates were released from from the Africa continent during the shipping trade. And maybe they've created their own colonies here in Florida as well. They've
Yeah,
been photographed. There's the Mayaka ape photos, which shows a really clear photo of it. It's something you really should look up, the Mayaka ape photos, swamp ape, because
yeah,
it
I've seen a
shows the
few of
eye.
the photos.
Yeah, it's nice because what they did is they had an actual primatologist compare an orangutan to those photos, and it matched on 80 of the 100 points that there was an actual primate in that person's backyard. So there is something there, and maybe it's not quite a dogman, maybe not quite a Bigfoot, but it is a very large primate that is able to move through the wetlands very easily.
Bobby Lineberger has a question here in the chat. He says, "Has any paranormal phenomenon ever been associated with skunk apes, like orbs, etc.?"
Not exactly with orbs, but the thing is that the skunk apes are in the wetlands, and so there's a lot of it's hard to get to those areas in those regions. What is paranormal wise is that they are able to move so easily in areas that you can't even take vehicles to. So there's got to be something about them that enables them to transverse the wetlands, the surfaces that easily.
Yeah, it's so many people, and we talked about this off air a couple weeks ago when we were talking on the phone, Gary. It's interesting to me that I do believe in the skunk ape being because of the photos, and I don't have a lot of stories about them. I did get a story from. Oh, you know what? I have one. Well, I have two. I have off the top of my head. I can tell you one were two teenagers that were riding around on a four-wheeler, and they weren't from Florida. That was the problem. And they went. They were on their cousin's property, and the uncle had kind of told them not to go too far afield. And before they could even get a reason why, they just burned off. And they ended up driving off into what they thought was grass, and it ended up being like swampy marsh. And they got stuck, and both of them got stuck. And so they were too small to be able to push the four-wheelers out, and they were way out. And so they didn't want to get in trouble. So they kept messing around with the four-wheelers, trying to get them to get out of that. Which it's not like quicksand, but you live in Florida, that marshy, wet,
Yeah, the muck.
whatever. Yeah, the muck, and they couldn't get it out. And it was dusk and it got dark, so they just started walking back, and every step was like, and finally they got onto some drier land. And when they got this ape-like creature stood up. But like you said, this to me definitely was not a Bigfoot type creature. It sounded more like and this is going to sound kind of odd too, but like a orangutan with like black fur. That's the best way they described it. And it's not even a story that I plucked myself. It's a story from a colleague that I was talking to one day. It may have been, I want to give credit where credit is due. It was either Brian Bowden or maybe it was Al Santoriga, if it was one of those guys. But we were talking on the phone, and they were telling me about the skunk ape. And it was pretty crazy. Like that happened. It was like a friend of theirs that happened to. And oh, you know what it was? I'm sorry, folks. But it was when we interviewed Al. We never released that, and it was with Armando.
Yeah.
And Al was telling us a story about a kid on a motorbike, and then Armando had filled in a story about the two kids that had the four wheelers, whatever, and they had gotten stuck. And so when they were trying to come back, that's what it was. So Al was a part of the conversation, but I don't know that we never released that episode. I don't know what happened. We lost it or it got corrupted or something happened to it.
Yeah. It's
Well, one of
probably
the
on a
best
hard drive
stories.
somewhere.
Go ahead.
One of the best stories I have on the skunk ape is that there was a young lady who was driving on the highway, on I-4 from Orlando to Key West, which gets very desolate. And she got a flat tire. Well, because she couldn't, there's no phone signal, and waiting for someone to drive by would be impossible. She decided to change the tire herself. And as she was changing it, on the other side of the road, opposite of her, a creature stuck his head out from behind one of the sage palms. A sage palm is kind of like a palm tree, but a bush.
Yeah.
So this creature, popped his head out from behind there and was watching her as she changed the tire. And she saw it take one hand and grab the very top part, which is kind of the fruit part, and with a simple twist, ripped that off and began eating it while I was watching her change the tire.
Wow.
By the time she finished changing the tire, and she didn't even waste time, putting the damaged tire in the trunk, she just left it on the side of the road. She got in the car and was driving off, and the creature came into the road and went over to inspect the tire. So these skunk apes could be very curious of people, especially out in the desolate areas where they don't see people or hear civilization as frequently as Orlando or Tampa is.
I think the skunk ape was just being a really good person and doesn't like littering. He was just like, you can't leave this here, lady. Lady, oh, dang.
Throws it through her back windshield. Shh, you left this.
Wow.
Well, maybe watching that lady was like our equivalent of like watching TV. That's why he just grabbed the snack.
Remember, Armando used to say that.
Yeah.
He used to say that people would give us stories about these, looking in the windows, and it was like watching TV, And there was a lady in North Carolina who had told Armando had filled that story. I think Tony, you might have been involved in that one too. And the lady gave you all that information. It was like the thing would tap on the glass.
Yeah, that was a wild story. It just wouldn't stop bothering her. I think she said like, there was a couple times to where like it felt like when she was walking and she saw it, but she just kept walking like she pretended she didn't see it. It would look at her. But then other times, like as soon as she went to like look at it, it would like hide. It wouldn't like disappear. It would just like hide, like it was playing hide and seek.
Yeah.
It was like it was playing little games with her.
Well, that's like the
Crazy.
Kelly Hopkinsville's goblins. Story of the family. They were just playing cards, and they were having family games and stuff, sitting around the table. And then all of a sudden, you had these little green men were coming over the yard and peeking in through their windows and tapping on the screens and so forth. Maybe they were just travelers from another world or another dimension, and they just heard the noise and the family, getting together, and they just wanted to join in.
I hate little green men. They piss me off.
Well, I said this, or you know what? I haven't said it yet, but I was talking
In another dimension.
Well, no, I said it on the show that we're putting on this Tuesday.
Oh, okay.
But I talked about maybe like what if the possibility is that these things are just as confused when they come over as we are when we see them. Where it's like it's not something that they control, where they just pop up real quick and they're like, oh, what the heck am I doing here? So when you see something like that, you would just be like, let me just watch them and see what they're doing, because I don't know. They look like me, but smaller, weaker, and less hairy. So
Well, I've
Yeah, it
always
might
had
explain
to,
like some aggression too. Like
Yeah.
they just confuse and just flip out and let me throw a rock at this dude's head just because.
Well, what
it's
about
there.
the theory? What about the theory of just like we do? What was the first thing that we sent out in orbit? We sent a dog. Then we sent a chimpanzee. What if that's the same thing that's happening here? Is that science of another dimension or of another location is sending animals, creatures over, basically just to see if the transportation is feasible.
If a Bigfoot or Dogman is one of those things pets, I don't want to meet that thing then.
That's what I keep saying, folks. They're not sending their best. They're not Americans. They're not sending their best.
They
They're
have to go
sending
back.
Dogman. They're sending Bigfoot. They're sending Mothman.
We got the best animals here.
We have no choice. We simply have no choice.
They're taking your jobs. China. Okay.
Well, maybe they're sending them because they have the best chance of survivability in a hostile
In
environment.
a hostile, exactly. I can tell you this: if you look at because what you said, that actually is a very interesting, and it hit the nail on the head of what I think about the Bigfoot that I get in Florida. Now, I have gotten in the northern part of Florida, I have gotten Bigfoot, actual what seem to be Bigfoot encounters. Going deeper into the peninsula and going further down into the south, you do get the skunk ape, whatever. And I've thought that before, that seems to be, to me, some sort of dark-haired orangutan. You know, just that from the stories I've gotten, like I've said, that I've read and other people's, and like I've got one encounter that was given to me that I think was probably a skunk ape, but that's it. And there's not a whole bunch of others that I could say for sure. Now, here's another thing. I got a report from a woman named Tina, her and her ex, who was now her ex-husband. She sent me a report when they were up in the Redwood Forest in Northern California, and they actually saw what they thought was a pack of chimps running around by themselves. And I had never, at that point, it was about 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, it wasn't really paranormal, and I thought, what the heck? And so I looked it up. And it turns out that there were chimpanzees that were released into the wild, and they just spread out into, you know, the woods of Northern California. And so they're like, I think just recently somebody actually either took a photo of it or they saw one of them, and it was like 2 or 3 of them. And I guess they're living out there, but nobody had seen them in 20 years. So she was shocked. She was like, me and my husband and my 2 children, we saw like a troop of chimps. Thank God that, I mean, these are wild chimps who probably haven't seen people in who knows how long. Thank God that they weren't close enough, like they didn't try to hurt them or anything, but they saw them. And she was like, it was crazy. Here, take that.
Well,
so it was
Florida
crazy.
Florida actually has a proven population of rhesus macaque monkeys that exists around the Silver River.
Oh, Gary, you're breaking up bad. Oh, man.
They have
lost
towards monkeys exist. Sorry.
Yeah, we totally lost you there for a minute.
Okay. What I was saying is that Florida has a colony of rhesus macaque monkeys, so not quite as big as chimpanzees or stuff, that live around the Silver River. And they would actually do boat tours, and you could actually see the monkeys jumping from tree to tree. And
that's how we ended up with lemurs here. We have lemurs here in Central Texas.
Exactly. So why couldn't something larger also have come the same way?
Yeah, I believe that those, though, these chimps in California and these, I'm just going to say it, like these black-haired orangutans, some of them do look like orangutans, are brown, and then possibly what could be running around out in Fouke too, Arkansas. My colleague Lyle saw something red-haired from a distance, you know, and he's like me. He doesn't claim a story unless he's, you know, like he sees it full on, you know, and so I don't claim a Bigfoot incident that my wife claims she saw. But it's kind of one of them things where when you take these creatures and you look at like all the weird stuff that surrounds Bigfoot, and then you kind of have to know where the line is. It kind of gets blurred, because I do believe that there is a difference between these, like I'm just going to say quantum Bigfoot type encounters. There's a huge difference between those and then the orangutan looking creatures down in Florida, and then those actual chimps that were living in the woods of California. And people can go and look that up and figure out the details or whatever. But this woman claims that she had seen it, and she didn't know about the It was years ago when it happened, but she didn't know anything about there being, chimps in. And then later on, she messaged me back, and we went back and forth. And she was like, "Yeah, there are actually chimps that were." I said, I told her that, and when I looked into it, and then she said, "Yeah." What's interesting to me too, you can kind of tell too, like what is real, like flesh and blood, solid, because not just the descriptions are different, but there's not like a lot of paranormal phenomena that surrounds it. But there seems to be with Bigfoot, just in particular, the different types of creatures that you get, and not the real ape-like ones like what we're talking about are actual flesh and blood. I believe they are. They're completely different. I think there's two different things, completely different. That's what I'm talking about. Whenever people say, well, how can you believe that there's two different things going on? That's because I do believe that there are physical ones out there. But I also believe that there's this, I don't know what this thing is, man, a quantum Bigfoot. It's like, I don't know how to describe it. All I can tell you is that that's what it seems like, So.
Well, there's a lot more stories of Bigfoot and what's called is it ultrasonics, and that they produce sounds that are so low that we can't hear them, and you don't have that in Florida as much.
Yeah.
So even vocalization is different.
Mm-hmm. Because I do believe, like what you said, that never even struck me. I knew that pigs had been released here because of the Spaniards, the French, and the British coming here, the Portuguese, the Dutch, everybody coming, and they're like, oh, just let the pigs run loose, and horses, the gallos, they
A
all
lot of
came
crazy
here.
stuff. Rats. I mean,
Well, they had rats, but I'm saying like they
Almost.
released a lot of things,
Yeah.
and it just, and the same thing, they took diseases from here and went back to Europe, like syphilis. That was given from the natives here, and then the Europeans gave smallpox. So it was like an exchange. A lot of people don't know that. They know about the smallpox, but they don't know that syphilis actually came from here and was taken back.
Well, there's always two sides of a coin, and it kind of just
that just goes with like why the pandemic spread the way it did, because it was like there's just you're like, okay, it's over here in the east. Well, it doesn't take anything to get on a plane or a boat or whatever, and then it's in Australia, and then it's here.
Well, people just also don't really do any thinking outside of like what they're told, or they don't really go into depth into things, because if they did, they would have realized like, hey, we went over there and we brought them stuff. Obviously, they would have stuff that would affect us the same way, but they don't think like that. They just automatically go to like, oh, you're bad, or oh, you have a problem. Immediately just focus on one aspect of it and not really think about what they did. Or I'm not saying that, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Agreed.
it's very interesting though to talk to you about these things. I was going to tell you another thing. I was going to ask you another thing. Now, your wife does ghosts. What are her thoughts on cryptids now? I mean, like what does she think about what you do, and what do you think about ghosts in the afterlife?
Well, we have different. I mean, she is completely on board with the whole cryptids because I've shown her that coelacanth, creatures that have supposedly been extinct, showing up to actually still be around. The okapi, a giant zebra-like giraffe that people didn't believe in. Even the lowland gorilla was thought to be fake until they actually caught a live one.
Mm-hmm.
So she's all on board because there has been enough actual proof and examples of cryptid animals being proven to be true. As far as ghosts are concerned, it's a harder science because to prove that a ghost exists, we want physical proof, and you're not really going to get that with a spirit because they're more energy based.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't even have the science to actually measure that kind of energy yet.
But it does exist. I mean, that's the thing. And let me ask you this, because there are people, not very many now, because of the reports that people have, if so many people have fielded, that still believe that there is an animal that walks around on two legs, that's a wolf-like animal. And I just can't wrap my mind around that, because having seen one when I was 15 and then having interviewed 1,000 people, that just, very small percentage of them had nothing weird. It was all just like, oh, well, it was just this, whatever. And that was it. And it looked just like a flesh and blood animal and whatever. Very few people just report that. It's typically there's more going on than just that. Now, Bigfoot, it's, I'd say from the reports I've gotten, it's about 60-40, 70-30 maybe. But if you really dig deep into it and you don't just scratch the surface like a lot of researchers do that, they just take the story of whatever niche that they're in, and that's it. Now, I'm not saying that people shouldn't have a niche, because this is a broad subject and not everybody needs to be a 40 per person. Like, you don't have to be, into every aspect of it.
Introspective and think about all kinds of different things. But I think asking questions, though, is what the most important thing is, that you have to be able to have that mindset of, like, even when you think you know something, always question it, because we don't know anything about this subject, and everything we kind of know changes so quickly, because I was talking to on a previous show about the possibility that every discovery we make, they might change how they live. We don't understand how time works and wherever they came from, so when they come over to here, it might change differently based on how quickly things developed in their dimension or their realm or whatever it is. And so
Well, I
it's
look at it this way. There's that famous fable, The Blind Wise Man and the Elephant. And it was a
Oh, yeah.
story about how a group of, wise men who were blind wanted to know what an elephant was. So they go up to the elephant. The first guy feels the leg and believes an elephant's like a tree. The next one goes and he touches the trunk and he thinks an elephant's like a snake. And then the third one goes and touches the ear and thinks it's like a palm leaf. They each only got one part of the story. So
right.
I think we have to be careful, because we need all of the information before we can make a complete discovery.
Mhm.
We only get a bit of the story every time we have a Bigfoot encounter. So we can't make a complete judgment of what Bigfoot is: paranormal, cryptid, supernatural, alien. We don't have all of those answers until we explore the whole animal.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one thing that kind of bothers me that I see is, like, I don't want to hate on it too much, but the classifications of dogmen, how, like, there's 7 different types, or like there's multiple different. I don't believe in that. I believe that, how are you supposed to know that? You don't have 7 different dogmen in front of you, and you can go, oh, this one has bigger ears and this one has a bigger head, which leads it to have a bigger brain, which leads it to think this way or think this way. It just looks different from the ones that you see normally, which can entirely be environmental. Could be just how it grew up in a hostile environment, so it had to change the way they adapted. It could be so many things like that, like Yetis and Bigfoot, even though they look like, or they look like 2 different creatures, you could see them and be like, they might be similar enough to where you could have them in the same category. But people don't do that. They think that what I found is correct, and what I found should be how I label everything else, and how all these things should be categorized. And I disagree with that a lot.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's just like if you describe a dog. Someone could describe a Chihuahua and another person could describe a Great Dane. They're both dogs, and you can't just arbitrarily, totally, classify them separately.
Yeah.
And they all have different characteristics too. I mean,
Yes.
like, me and my friend, I have actually 3 friends who are dog handlers. One of my friends, Will, we used to train dogs years ago, and he's a police officer now up in Virginia, but he trained Belgian Malinois. And I had Mastiffs, and my friend Alex had Mastiffs mixed with, what are they called? Rottweilers. And they made really good dogs. And so those dogs he had, they came out really well because they had both the good traits of both breeds. And I had an English Mastiff. I had a couple of different dogs, and I had an English Mastiff and a German Shepherd, and we trained them. And then we would use them to train the puppies. And I did this off and on, kind of like it was a job, but then it became kind of like a hobby. And I did it off and on for about 3 or 4 years, and it was fun. I did that for a while. Alec, my godson, his dad, who's now deceased, was one of the people that I trained the dogs with. But I was talking to a friend of mine the other day about Malinois, and he was telling me that his dog, was very, very, very well behaved, but he got you okay?
Yeah, it's in my head.
You sit on the microphone,
Dude.
dude. He just like bonked his head, like boom. But he got this other dog that was Belgian Malinois and Dutch Shepherd, and he thought, oh, this is going to be a great mix. No, it absolutely, that whole litter was just not good. They didn't have the attention span. They would take off and not come back and not do. And he goes, and I tried, and maybe it was just the parents. I don't know. But we had the same thing happen. We ended up with a lab Mastiff mix that somebody thought would be a good idea, and they just were so playful. Like they didn't want to do stuff. They didn't want to be aggressive in any way, and you had to train them to be guard dogs, and they just weren't going to do it. They were like, yeah, kind of want to do it, but then I kind of just want to play and lay around. And then, so it's like if you were to look at it from that perspective, if Dogman, werewolves, whatever these things are, if they're anything like dogs, yeah, that could be the case. But having come from a dog background, I don't think these things are dogs. They don't look like dogs, they don't act like dogs, and they don't do jack all that dogs do. They do all kinds of bad things and none of the good things. I haven't heard too many people talking about, this dog man pulled me from a burning building. Like I read a story out of Pennsylvania where a dog saved some kid years ago from I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy. Somebody sent it to me. I don't hear about these things doing that. And now you do sometimes get occasional stories, and this one was actually out of Florida where a guy claims that a Bigfoot creature saved him down in the Everglades, and it was very much a Sasquatch. It was not a skunk ape type creature, and it actually saved him from what he said was a panther, a black panther. Now, people may not realize this, but there are a ton of Black Panther stories that come out of the Florida Everglades.
Well, pretty much just the southern of the United States. You get quite.
Oh yeah, but Florida is just inundated with them.
Mm.
And
they did a whole conservation program on trying to save the Florida panther. And when you did that, you save all of the big cats. So even if there was any Black Panthers, then they got in the same protection that the Florida panther and cougar got.
Exactly. Yeah, and they've had the ability to just procreate and just get, Yeah, so there is definitely a large population there, and they proliferated. I mean, it's big time. And so, but this guy says he was about to be attacked by it. It's not one of my stories that I collected or whatever. It was somebody, I read it somewhere. I think it was like in a group or something. And I didn't talk to this person. I didn't speak to him or communicate with him at all. And this guy was in a group, I believe it was a Bigfoot group, and he claims that a Bigfoot saved him. Now, I'm not going to argue with him. I don't know. But I haven't gotten any stories like that about Dogman. Dogman seems to be kind of like a butthole. He just kind of does not. He's not really into helping people. I mean, he'll attack you, and people try to say, well, they won't attack you. I'm like, bull crap, And then one lady argued with me. She went to give me her story. And get this is funny. I'm not going to say her name because I don't do that. I'm not like that. But she was very, very off base, and she kept telling me that she was friends with a pack of them, and I'm like, okay, maybe this is, I don't know. Try to be open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brain falls out of your head. So I said that's very unlikely. I'm not buying that too much. And that they were all sweet and nice, and they brought her gifts and stuff. And I'm like, I don't. So I'm kind of listening to it, and I said, I have heard this. She's ever heard of this? And I said, I've heard of it before. And she's like, you don't believe me, do you? And I'm not going to lie to her. I just said, no, I don't. I'm sorry. And then she's like, that right there is the problem, young man. And I'm like, okay. Well, she called me a young man, so she's got to be really good. So I'm like 48 years old, or I'm not like a little kid. I'm like, okay, lady, can I have some more chocolate? No, I mean, I told her, I said, look, she turned into like a mean, like witch real quick. Like she's like, that's the problem. And you're just a nasty, mean person who wants to kill and eradicate them. And I was like, well, I really don't think you can do it that way. I don't think that's how it works. And so she was very adamant that they were kind and gentle, and I was just like, this is flipping crazy. I don't believe this.
Well, the thing is
Go ahead.
like those ones you met were kind and gentle. They act like, you know, you meet one Dogman and it's like a be all.
She said there was
end
a
all.
pack of them.
It doesn't matter how many she met, unless she met every Dogman in existence, and it was like, yep, these are all cool. They're all my buddies. They come over and hang out all the time. Then you can't say for certain that every Dogman is a safe creature. And another thing I want to talk about is like, do you think that maybe because they're pack animals, they live in a very like that's how they're formed, and compared to Bigfoot, who are more like familial centered, that they're more predatory,
Like the way that they in groups.
Yeah.
I don't know, Gary. What do you think about that?
Well, we just did an episode on the Parmer pack, and that was the
Oh, yeah.
story up in Maine of a family in their farmhouse that got attacked by these enormous wolves that stood up on two legs, and they came as a pack, organized. The father of the family said that he could even tell that they were communicating with each other. So there was definitely a pack mentality, a family group of 5 of these large wolf-like humanoids. So there's one case right there that's very prominent and very supportive of that argument.
Well, do you remember on Hernandez Ranch the story of Stripes?
Yeah.
Obviously you remember.
You're talking to me?
Yeah,
Of course.
Yeah, obviously. But do you remember how he seemed really friendly, like because he was raised by him, and then as soon as he got back, he noticed the Dogman in the area kind of chilled out, or they kind of seemed like they had a different attitude at first. It might be something like that, to where like it just their benevolence depends on who's pack leader at the moment.
Let me say something about that real quick. The other thing that Abel had said to me, and his nephews, okay, everybody in his family agreed with this. His brothers, his nephews, everybody. Met his cousin, and you knew Javi. I mean, dang it. Okay, well, listen. Anyway, do you remember though?
Yeah.
Okay, that was his situation with them.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else had that.
Yeah.
Like nobody else had that kind of situation. It was him and him alone, and it was only with that one creature, not his offspring.
Yeah, like as soon as
it was, that was it. There was no going back. I mean,
it was like as soon as the next generation came up, it was like, okay, we're back to war now.
Yeah,
It's
they
like,
were just, they attacked his horse or his mule,
Mhm.
his mule. They killed it. Yeah, we didn't even talk about that on the show. That was because that was after one of, therapist's people went and put a business card in his mailbox and ruined that. But we didn't. He died. We didn't talk. And that's what he's talking about, Gary. In case you don't know, I used to work on another podcast, and this guy, can you answer that for me? It's work. And so one of the things that he did, like he had somebody who went and, at least this is what I believe, and they talked, they found this witness, and this guy was very irate about it. I never gave anybody information for them to do that, never gave anybody permission to do that. I am still friends with his nephews to this day, and actually one of his great niece's stories in my book. It is something I'm going to talk about at the conference too. I want to do my presentation, but it's very interesting when you get into this, because the story of the Parmer pack. One of the things about that, it started off where they found a hole and there were orbs involved. There were lights that were involved in that.
A couple of weeks beforehand, they saw orbs and they thought it was a poacher. And when they went out there, then the lights disappeared. And then shortly after that, the daughter and her boyfriend went out walking through the same woods, and they found a large earthen mound, a den that was camouflaged with an opening that was large enough for a man size to come in and out of.
Yeah. And see, and that's what happened with this ranch. They found a giant hole, and they did something they probably shouldn't have. They tried to cover it up. The vaqueros, the cowboys out there tried to say, well, let's cover this hole up because somebody's horse is going to fall in it. And then when they did, then all hell broke loose. And there again, that supports my theories about the inner earth. And so once again, I'm right, folks. Anyway, no,
Of course.
I'm just kidding. But no,
Well,
seriously.
as experts, we all are right.
Yeah, as experts. And Gary, you're a temporary expert by being in our presence, we're going to let you be an honorary expert. Okay, so
I feel honored.
that you should. Yes, you should.
I feel
Expert
so
by
Yeah, and you have to
smart all
talk
of a
like this.
sudden.
Yes, 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 you should.
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah,
I
see?
see.
And you have to get a monocle and grow a mustache that you can like twirl.
Twirl at the end there. Yes.
I know Dogman,
You
see?
know, Dogman.
Yeah.
Yes. Bigfoot. Yes.
Get a little like a corncob pipe.
Oh,
You be like that lady on Josie Wales. I say all that big talk's worth doodly squat.
Yeah.
I'm an expert over here. Let me tell you something. No, I think what we're dealing with though is like a bunch of different phenomena that's going on at all times. And I think it all goes back to quantum theory and physics and things. And I do believe that science, it plays a large part. Now, what really disappoints me is that some of these people, they know the science and they just choose to ignore it because money's on the line or reputation's on the line. And I see it. I'm seeing it right now with a very close friend of mine. She's going through hell. She's embattled. And, and I'm going to put my word in, at the conference and say what I got to say. So that's one of the reasons why I want the conference to be televised to as many people as possible, because I want you to hear what I have to say about this. It's not going to be anything mind-blowing, but I am going to say some things that may make people think, whoa, I have to say what I think is going on. And I'm not one of these people that's really, I'm not going to back down and let others just run over me with their pseudo intellectualism. And that's what I think is running amok right now, is a lot of people who should be taking the lead. Now, Anthony and I had this conversation, Gary, a couple days ago about leaders. And we were talking about this new thing where people call themselves Sigma male. You're not an alpha male, but you're not going to be a beta, because being a beta is a bad thing now, because if you follow somebody, then you're a punk, So you're going to be a Sigma male who's like a rogue, goes out and does his own thing and doesn't conform, basically applauding yourself for being a borderline sociopath. And I see this behavior in this, and there's all these channels dedicated to it, and there's all these guys going, yeah, that's me, that's me. Well, being a nonconformist in any shape or form, it just depends on the situation. Like, if there's something bad, and hi Nellie, how you doing? She's right there. So if there's something bad going on with it, then you need to lost my train of thought. Not conform. I get it, but just to not conform for the sake of not conforming is really ridiculous. And one of the things I was going to say, I kind of lost my train of thought there. What were we talking about? Leadership.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, you either you lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way. And that's a big problem, because these people, they don't want to be leaders, but they don't want to be followers, or they're not capable of being leaders, put it that way, or they don't want the responsibility of being a leader. In my life, in the role that I played, I was watching one of these videos that somebody had sent me about Sigma male, whatever, and I was watching it, and I could relate to that. Early on in my life, I was not an alpha male guy. I wasn't, I just kind of fell in line, did what I was supposed to do and whatever, and I hung out with people, and I had role models and mentors and things. But I never thought of it in any other way as just, it's either this or that. No, but there was a part of me that didn't always want to follow, because I didn't think these people had my best interest, or they didn't seem to be good leaders. Now, I'm the first person that'll step up and I will follow a good leader. But what happened in my life over and over again is I looked around and I saw that people that I was following weren't really they weren't like people I should be following, like I was being, friends with a guy, like I'm not going to he was on a show, man, about this. He was in the prison gang years ago, and then he was like in prison, and he's a very close friend of mine, and he was one of my mentors. And that's not somebody you should be like, oh, this guy is somebody you should be following. So I had to reevaluate myself in my life and look at that and go, I'm kind of going to go my own way. And then eventually, once you take the lead, and if people want to follow you, they will. And then it just kind of happens that people follow you, and then you kind of fall into that alpha role. But it never works out when people are pushing that and they're trying to be like, I want to be in charge. I want to be the boss, because there's a reason why they're doing that. Why are they doing that? You know, why is it? Do they have people's best interests, or are they just power hungry, or do they just want something, you know, and either it's money, or they want power, or they want some sort of prestige, you know, they want recognition. And a lot of times those are the people that end up in charge, you know, because they have all this ambition and the wrong will to feed it. And then people end up following them because they're too weak to resist, because everybody's doing it. Well, that was never me. And I'm telling you this because in this field, I never set out like, I'm going to be a leader and I'm going to change the world. That's never been my goal, my, you know, end game. All I saw was just people who were divided and that shouldn't have been. And we all should have been coming together. And that was one of the reasons why me and you, you know, we began to talk. And I just thought, this is what needs to happen. We need to come together. We need to you know, get together, and we need to form some sort of bonds with one another so that we can get down to the nitty gritty and get these stories out there. And I think your channel does that. And it is become now like lead, follow, or get out of the way. And there's so many people who are just, they're not leading, they're not following, but they don't want to get the hell out of the way.
Yeah, they want to stay where they're at.
Yeah.
Get out the laurels with it, and
Mhm.
it's like you're behind, but you don't want to catch up. And it's a dang shame, because, you know, it's a waste of opportunity. I mean, realistically, we should be looking, you know, at the old generation of hunters, basically, I guess is how we could say it, but of researchers and people who try to find this knowledge. We should be looking at them like, oh, thank you for helping us pave the way so that when we reach these new subjects, we could find the answer that we've all been searching for. But instead, you get this kind of like, oh, you know, you're not, even though you're up and coming, you don't know what you're talking about, or you need to just shut up because you're wrong. And it's like, well, how do you know? Because you haven't done anything yet. So it leads to all this infighting when it really should just be a conclusive, connective, you know, community where people can all go in there and be like, whether you've been researching Bigfoot for all 70 years or you've been researching it for 12 years, it doesn't matter, because like all that knowledge is towards leading to the truth. But I think we've strayed away from that, and I think people are just so set in their ways of thinking that they're right that they refuse to be, you know, proven wrong, or even having
or really the
given
problem,
the ability to get proven wrong, I guess.
going further with it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the problem. They'll go to a certain point, they go to the doorstep of the answer, and then they stop.
Mm-hmm.
And then they encourage everyone else to do the same because it benefits them somehow, either economically or it benefits their prestige, you know, or their power. And that's a problem. That is not a leader that you should follow. But Gary, do you agree with that, or what do you think? I mean, where we're at in this field.
When I was in the military for 20 years, and one of the things that we learned during leadership is that it's easy to be in first place if you're holding everyone else back. And that's what you try not to do. So you have these people who, you know, they'll just walk, but they're in first place because they're making everyone else crawl.
Yeah.
And we're never going to get progress unless we're willing to go around that person.
Yeah,
And
Cooper
like
Young
you
says
said,
emotions are more important than logic these days. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gary.
No, that's why I was saying there's basically four motivating forces. People do something for one or a combination of these items. They either do it for power, they do it for money, or they do it for fame. Those are the three most common. And those are the most, there's nothing negative about them because, you know, we all need those. But the fourth one is we do it for the love of it. I mean, like your children, you do anything for your children. You don't care if it gets recognized. You don't get any money out of it. You don't get any power. You do it because you have a love of your child. And sometimes we need that in subjects like this. We need to have a passion for it, that you're not worried about getting paid for it. You're not going to get power from it. And most of the time you'll get a little bit of fame, but most of the time, most of the people who bring up these stories get ridiculed more than they get famous.
Yeah, they get made fun of.
Yeah, so you have to have a passion for it in order for this field to survive.
Well, you also have to, like, you know, it's like, you know, with fame, they think that, you know, fame, power, and money, they don't use that to further anything. They just use it like they greedily hoard it for themselves. And I think
Agreed.
that's another big issue is like, you know, with fame, we don't look at it as like, oh, we're famous now. Oh, people know us. We look at it as like, oh, look at all the people that our message has reached. And we hope that we keep expanding so that our message will reach more people. You know, with money, we've just put all the money we get, we put it back into the show. We put it so that we can improve. You know, we got new cameras, these beautiful new mics that, you know, all this stuff is just like, oh, we can keep moving forward and moving forward and moving forward. Not because, you know, we're trying to reach some end goal of like $1 million and 1 million followers and 1 million. We don't have any of that. It's just about, we want to put all of our focus into this because we want this to succeed, because when this succeeds, we know that the topic of figuring out what the heck is going on would be furthered along. And a lot of people don't look at it that way. They have a very closed-minded view of like, I want to be famous so
or it's
I
all
could
about
be, so people know
competition.
me. I want the
Yeah.
money so that I'm rich.
Yeah.
Or, you know,
And like I said,
Yeah, they miss the
competition.
passion part.
The passion.
mhm.
You got to be passionate. You got to be passionate about what you do. This didn't start out as a job for me. This started out as a hobby. And there's only been a few times where I've actually been out here where I've just not wanted to be here. And that was, you know, I had death in the family and things like that. I mean, that's other than that. I mean, I've always wanted to be here, and I'm passionate about it. And I love talking to my guests, and I love talking about these subjects. And so that's pretty much it for me. And folks, did we put the link up where we can find Gary? Within the Midst podcast, we need to put the link up.
Yeah.
I will put that up, but I just want to say this comment real quick. XD7 said, if you betray your own conscience, then you are not part of the society. You are someone's idiot.
Yeah,
Agreed.
yeah, totally agree on that one. Yeah, so we put your thing up there. We're gonna get you there, but Gary, thank you for coming on, and we're gonna talk again. And I would like to have a more in depth conversation, and we could do it on our podcast, and we can record. Excuse me, because when I get back from the conference, I'm planning on doing every Thursday. It may not be the week right after the conference, folks, the week of Labor Day, but it'll probably be the next week. And we're going to start. I already have my first guest we're going to record with, and we're gonna start doing Thursdays. Is going to be just a guest every Thursday for the podcast. Which
Yeah,
is
we're
gonna
going to
be
try
on
to
YouTube
like
too.
mirror the lives where we
The
do.
lives are going to be one guest, and then the stories, and then the podcast is going to be the same. It's going to be a guest, and then we're going to have an hour long on Tuesday. So every Tuesday and Thursday, you'll get a podcast episode, and then you'll get the 3 hours on Friday, 3 hours on Sunday. So Gary, we appreciate you coming on, man, and we're
I
going to
love it.
run. And I'm glad you came on and say hi to your wife for me. And you guys keep doing what you do. Keep fighting the good fight.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. Like I said, I'm still kind of new at this, so this was a great chance for me to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I think you know what you're doing. I think you just
Well, you got the passion for it.
you got the passion for it. I
and you
think
got a winning system. You know, you and your wife,
Mhm.
I think you guys figured it out a way that really works.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
And definitely check out his show Within the Midst, folks. Check it out. Good stuff. All right, Gary, I'm gonna let you run, man.
All right. You have a good night.
You too, man. All right, good night. Bye. So that was Gary Brand. He's a good guy, and nice guy. Glad to call him a friend. Oh, my eyes are burning.
Is he going to be at the conference?
He was. He just said he's not gonna be able to make it
Oh,
because,
dang.
and I just saw the Holly M dropped out too because Holly's afraid to fly. Way to go, Holly.
Understandably.
Well, Buddy Holly. I mean, planes.
Yeah, I get it. There's a lot of.
That doesn't make you feel better, Holly. I don't know what will. Okay. No, I understand. If you don't want to fly, you don't want to fly. I mean, that's all there is to it. I mean, we got Barton to fly out here back in October, and it was he got off the plane and he was like, "Woo," you know, like it was rough.
And flying these days isn't all it cracked up to be. I mean, it's just horrible. You're just
Crammed in.
crammed in a tube like a bunch of sardines, way too high, and you're just sitting there struggling.
Except if you're going to our conference and it's not.
Mm.
Okay. No, man. So, folks, here's what I'm going to tell you. We're going to talk a little bit about this book that I had read years ago, but I can't remember the dang name of it. And that's a shame. There's so many books written about mythology, And it has to do with a story. And if I remember correctly, it was the story of Kratos was kind of based on that, you know, and I'm not sure 100% that that's what that is. It could just be, you know, a coincidence, but I think what they did was, and I'm not the people that made the game, so I don't know, but the story is based on a character that actually was wronged, and it started out. And I wish Anthony, he's not in here. And give me 1 second, folks. Just can you talk for just a minute?
Mhm.
I'll be right back. Because I can get that information.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to ASMR with Tony. Anthony's dealing with something that we've had to deal with in the beginning, so give him a bit of time. How's everybody doing tonight, though? Let me read some comments here. That is true, Dick Richards, but at the same time, it's not going to stop, you know, people from having their fears. They say the same thing about like, oh, it's so much safer to be in the ocean with sharks, but it's like, there's still sharks. Like, you know, it doesn't make you getting eaten by a shark any better, even if the chance is lowered. They're saying pho, Brett. Of course I do. Night Adventures with Tony is not something I would like to be known as. Sounds like a different kind of show, if I'm being honest. Well, Corley, we're gonna have different chairs here, so hopefully they're better. I would still say maybe bring like a pillow or something to sit on, because you never know. I haven't played the new God of War. I've seen some videos of it. What's my thoughts on scientists in China putting skin on robots? And a scientist saying the Terminator movie could be a reality time travel and all. I believe fantasy is just the aspirations of people who, you know, want to lead it to future. I think like a lot of the things that they bring up in fantasy is stuff, or sci-fi in specific, is stuff like that they've already kind of have an inkling of, and then they're just like living. So the possibility of it is not that astounding to me, and the fact that they're doing it, it was like as soon as I saw Terminator, I was like, oh, that's probably going to happen.
So what are you talking about here?
Someone said, what's your thoughts on scientists in China putting skin on robots, and a scientist saying the Terminator movie could be a reality time travel and all?
The Koreans have made a robot. They did that before. It's already been done.
Well, I was saying, like, you know, as soon as you saw in fantasy or sci-fi, the possibility of it happening in real life isn't that crazy.
So, folks, the other day, me and Anthony were talking, and I see we've lost a few folks there because of my absence. And I hate doing that. I'm sorry, folks. I had to go and use the restroom really quick. And one of the things I was talking to my nephew about this, and we talked about a little bit earlier. We talked about this. We talked about how there was a particular large corporation, which I'm not going to mention their name, but they make movies for kids for the most part, and they get their inspiration from actual stories. And we started talking about Pinocchio, and if you look at the story of Pinocchio, I mean, I'm not going to even say it on the show. Just go and tell me what you think it's about. The guy's name is Geppetto. Okay. I mean, let's be real here. Okay. And then there's a scene where they talk about, an island and stuff, dude. I'm not gonna get into all that, but we went into the whole Peter Pan and what that was, and I'm gonna give it to you. I'm gonna lay it out there for you, and Josh, your opinion on the pick. Which pick is that? Go ahead and tell them about Peter Pan. What you know about that?
Well, so in the original book of Peter Pan, like, because when we think Peter Pan, we think of the Disney movie. But in the original story, the reason that I think they're called the Lost Boys, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reason they never grow old is because he removes them from this mortal coil before they become men.
They get
right?
unalived?
Yeah, they get. You don't have to have your headphones on.
Oh, I forgot.
Yeah. But yeah, like So if you think about it, Peter Pan, what's that name again? Pan. It's like
it's
from like demonic or something.
Yeah. Go ahead and explain it.
But yeah, so he takes children to this other world that's not of our world, and they're basically never seen again. That's why they never grow old, because they live there until they're starting to become men, and then he takes their lives. And there's like this I think it's like a fan theory or something about Captain Hook, about how Captain Hook was originally one of the Lost Boys too, but that he actually escaped Peter Pan before you could kill him, and he collected other Lost Boys who escaped as well, and they started a rebellion, and so Captain Hook is actually like one of the good guys, and he's trying to save the Lost Boys. But either way, I mean that's like a fan theory, but it's cool and it makes sense. But the fact is, Peter Pan, like, if you think about what that creature really is, it's not like it's not a child's friend. They're never like, it's a spirit that takes children and they're never seen again. It takes them to another world. It's like, and then Tinkerbell is a fairy. It's like the evil fate, the unseelie court.
Mm-hmm.
It's terrible.
Yeah, but a lot of those stories, Grimm's actual tales are horrible. They're not.
Yeah, they're
fun
not
little tales.
Fun little goofy. Yeah, so folks, let me give you the breakdown of this, and I'm going to tell you what this is. Put the camera on me, folks. And I'm sorry to tell you this, folks. We're dealing with an issue with a family member, and that's why we're just, it's rough. We're doing the best we can. Okay, so what I explained to Anthony, and we looked for the book high and low. I thought I had borrowed it from my friend and never gave it back, because people have done that to me, and I've done that to people. I didn't do it on purpose. My friend R.S. used to do that. He used to borrow my books, and then never saw him again, but yet he lent me to Shauna May, and then he's like, where's my book? Where's my book? Where's my book? He's like that kid on that show, where's my $2 or whatever it was, like running around the newspaper route. I forgot the name of it. Better Off Dead or something. The kid was like trying to collect the money for the newspaper. That's what R.S. would do to me when he'd lend me a book. But he would take my books, and I'd never see him again. And your stepdad did that to me too. So did Alex's dad. He'd take all my books.
Well, Chad probably just forgot he gave them to you.
Yeah, pretty sure. But the thing is, I read this, and it was a book from the 1800s. This is how old this book was. The first print was. And I'm pretty sure, I'm almost positive it's out of print, but you might be able to find it somewhere. And I don't know, I can't remember the name of it. But I read this story. Now, what it has to do with Kratos from the game God of War and all that, I'll explain it to you. I'm going to bring this all full circle, okay? Pan represents the god Pan, right? Who is a goat-headed creature, satyr, whatever, okay? He looks like a mixture between a man and a goat legs, or he can look like a human with goat horns and a little bit of a face like a goat, or maybe just a goat-like, whatever. Now, it's going to tie in to some other things, so pay attention what I'm going to tell you. Now, I'm going to give you the 411 on this. What this thing is a child snatcher. A lot of the stories that I've gotten and I've read and I've heard are of this Pan satyr creature. They play a flute, and they lure children. They do all kinds of things. And there's one that's very famous named Krampus, and he shows up with Santa Claus, oftentimes accompanied with little dark elves, which is why the person that sent me the story about that thing that looked like a demonic toddler, I'd like to get that story because I think that it ties in. These little elves, these dark elves, are actually or former victims or children of this demonic Krampus. He comes and takes them. They're bad, so he takes them, and they become his little helpers. And he is not just one entity. There's an army of Krampuses. When you watch these festivals, you see multiple Krampuses with, and each one of them has their own little army of like dark children looking creatures that follow them around. They beat the bad kids and put them in a bag, and they take them. Now, there is, and always has been and will be probably forever, this evil god known as Moloch. Now, what Moloch is the child eater. He is a Canaanite god, and at many times, off and on, the Israelites would fall into worship of him, and then they were chastised over and over again for doing it, but they kept doing it, and then they would fall out, and they come back. And he competed with the God of Israel for the affections of the people. He was an oxen-headed god or a bull-headed god. Okay. Now, in the book that I was reading years ago when I was young, and I hadn't heard the name again until I had a statue. Remember, Anthony, of the Minotaur?
Yeah.
And it was like I had all these statues of these different, different types of whatever in where I used to live. And one of them his name was Torgamir. Now, Torgamir was an avatar of, or incarnation of the Bullman. Remember Tiamat? If you paid attention in class here, folks, I'm joking. But Tiamat was the one that created the Bullman. Now, the main one became Moloch. Okay? This is what I believe could have happened. I'm not saying this is 100%, but if you, Max Brandt, you're right, but it's still the representation. I believe that the satyrs or the goatman were actually very common in Greece. There was a creature, and his name was supposedly Torgamir, and it was known from the Patmosians, the Minoans, all these different, the Greeks. They all had this different belief of the bullman, and that he was sort of a representation of the ultimate law of kill or be killed, right? And he was worshipped in the Isle of Crete, and paid homage. That stuff is really giving me a headache. Don't do that anymore, please. Sorry, folks. That vape. It is getting burnt. It's messing with me bad. My nephew, godson Tony Mushu, likes to do the vape, and it's really getting to me. So Tiamat created this, right? Created all these different creatures according to the Sumerian beliefs, right? We've talked about this before, how she went to war with her son Marduk, all right? Pan was one of the representations of the satyr, goatman, whatever. His job was to lure children with a flute, and then they would take them on board these ships. One of the pictures I remember seeing in this book was these pirates. Get this. And in the book, I thought it was just a cute little story, but these people on the ship, they had the heads that looked like dogs, right? Now, I talked about this in one of my early episodes. One of my listeners from Europe, I believe she was from not Germany, or maybe she was from Germany. I thought it was Romania or something, but she sent me, and my old co-host and the guys here next to me, she sent us these pictures a long time ago, 4 years ago or something like that, of these fairy tales and how these Germanic fairy tales all had these how do you say it? That word, okay? Anthropomorphic. And they were all, the pigs walked on two legs, the goats walked on two legs, Billy Goat's gruff, they were all on two legs. The big bad wolf, he walked on two legs. They were all human-like with wolf and pig heads. This book that I read from the 1800s, which may have been a retelling from an earlier stories, it was a book about mythology, and I can't remember the author of it, but this book exists. I know it does somewhere. Somebody's got it. But it showed the satyrs with bags over their shoulders, and these were children, and the sailors were dog-headed creatures. One of the creatures in this book, I remember paying attention to detail. He had a little, like a thing on his shoulder right here, and it was a bullhead. And I thought, that's interesting. And they were taking them to Crete. Now, it said in the book that Torgamir, which was the bullheaded creature that was kept on the island of Crete, that he was actually, that's the name that was given to the Minotaur. Now, he was of the race of Moloch. Like Moloch was just like the main one. Pan, Moloch, Krampus, these are all names of different names of individuals that belong to a certain species. Okay? They are kind of like the Shaitan. People say it's just Satan, but imagine that there's a bunch of Joshes, and I'm just one of them, but everybody says Josh and they just think of the same guy. It's kind of like that. Okay? But there was a race of these beings. Okay? So Pan would actually take these children, and then he would get his reward or whatever, and then he would go back to the mainland of Greece to wreak havoc and hell on the people of Greece and do whatever it was that he did, or they did. There was a race of them. This particular creature, these Greek children, were used in their ceremonies. The Cretes, that's why the word Cretan became like a word for a barbaric, which eventually became the word for a dumbass, okay? A Cretan, because the Greeks hated the Cretans because they did this. They would take their children and they would sacrifice them to the Minotaur in the labyrinth, okay? There was even a movie called, and Anthony, you talked about it, Pan's Labyrinth, right? These creatures are all connected to this labyrinth, which was shaped like a spiral, okay? Now, if you go down the rabbit hole, and you start to read about these people who abduct children and do all these things, they use that symbol as a spiral. Okay? I don't know how much I can say here. Okay? Well, without getting, whatever. But they were connected. They worked together, these anthropomorphic creatures. Okay? They were ferried across the water by these sailors that were these cynocephali dogmen. And the Dogman, it talks about these creatures in Indian mythology too. The Dogmen were like mercenaries. They would fight for the highest bidder, and they even knew how to sail. They were sailors. They could do all kinds of stuff. And my former co-host, we've been talking about him a lot today. I don't know why, but he keeps coming up. But he had talked about how he believes that maybe at one time they had a semblance of a civilization above ground, and eventually they just became more feral, and then they just went, whatever. But they all are very metaphysical beings. They have an ability to move in and out of our reality. Pan, what they did was they just gave him a name, Peter Pan, like, oh, Peter Pan. And he's just, come on, let's go, kids, let's go, yeah, let's have fun. Live forever. Yeah, we're going to live forever, never, never land. Come on, children. And then it is odd that, he's hanging out with kids, and then a very famous pop star names his thing Neverland, whatever. Kind of weird, right? Okay, but anyway, follow what I'm telling you here. Pan would steal these kids, and he would take them to basically the labyrinth, and the home of the Minotaur, a.k.a. Moloch, okay? Moloch was just, I believe, one representative of that. And Baphomet was one representative of the goat-headed creature. These creatures were worshipped as gods. They got energy from it. They worked together, and they did what they did. And they do what they do. But here's the thing. These fairy tales were not just fairy tales. And now think about it, fairy tales, right? Because I've talked about this before, just like I believe the Jinn in the Middle East, that's their land. The Fae they hold sway in the British Isles, and the elves, the ice elves up in Iceland and in places like that in the northern Scandinavian countries. You have different names. Down in Germany, they have the troll. There's all these different types of creatures, right? They are all cousins. They're all related. Doesn't mean that they're all the same. And they do still exist. And people don't really understand what they're dealing with. They don't really grasp what this is. And these are different. That's why compartmentalization to me is so dangerous, because if you're looking at the lens through one religion, and I'm not telling you we should all, don't get it twisted and that we should all embrace all religions. No, because each religion has a bunch of junk in it that's not supposed to be. It's just stuff added on by mankind. Okay? Every religion does. Believe me, they do. They add stuff to it. They take stuff away. And then everybody thinks they're right. And I tell everybody, you are right, but you're only partly right. You don't have the whole picture. It's like a star fell from the sky and everybody got a piece of it and said, hey, I found the truth. You did, but it's all part of a bigger mosaic. Okay? You have to understand this. All right? These religions are lacking in something. Okay? They're all related. They're all connected. Pan is evil. It's a demon. It's a bad thing. It is not a good thing. I don't care what anybody says. Anything that plays a flute to try to lure people or children or whatever into the woods is not a good thing. It's not going to do something good for you. Every time we get stories about these creatures, they're chasing or attacking or doing something bad. Now, where Kratos comes in, if I remember correctly in the book, his name was Krakatos or something like that, or I could be off. It could be something else. But in the game God of War, they call him Kratos. Now, what happened was Krakatos, his son was abducted and taken by the goatmen. Pan took his child, and then he was taken and sold into slavery on a ship. And then he worked for a while, and then when he reached a certain age, he was taken to Crete, and then he was forced to face the Minotaur. This is what ends up unfolding in the story I read. And it was like I was a kid. I was like 18, like I said. And I remember reading that and thinking, oh, that's pretty cool story, whatever. Well, it just came to me whenever me and Anthony were talking. I was like, yeah, I've read about that. And when you look at these fairy tales, this is the origin. Like, it's all of this together. You know what I mean? It's all, we have amnesia. We didn't realize that we're all the same. We've all been together for a long time. Kratos, or Krakatos, whatever his name, he was from Sparta in the story that was written about him. And what he did was he was angry. He put together a small little group of other people who were disenfranchised because their officials weren't doing anything about it, and some of these people were even worshiping these creatures. So they weren't doing anything for him. So he got angry, and he sacrificed like a stag or something to the god of war, which was Ares. Now Ares appears to him. Now Ares isn't a good guy. He's not, folks. I'm telling you, he's not a good guy. He's not an American. He's not. He shows up. And he's like, yeah, I'll help you. What do you want? And he says, I want revenge, and I want to get my son back. Well, Ares, gears start turning, and the gods, the old gods, which I believe were, basically the fallen, the Nephilim, whatever you want to call them, different, types of beings, whatever. Ares, the son of Zeus, he was as evil as they come. He's the god of war. I mean, like, he makes war. That's what he does. He finds ways to make people die so that he can collect the energy. So Ares, also known as Mars by the Romans, he comes up with his own idea. He says, you know what? I'm going to give you a list of tasks, because Ares is a very busy guy. So he tells Krakatos, he says, if you go and you kill these centaurs, then that's one, and then you go and you fight this pig man or whatever there was this creature that was it looked like a boar. Go and slay him, and then go do this and do that, and then it's like same thing happened with Hercules, the 12 labors, right? He had an evil stepmother. I can relate, believe me. Especially this clean out the stables part. Believe me, I've actually done that. So. Here's this guy who's hurting because his son was one of the children that was taken to be sacrificed, and he's like, he's got his little pack of friends there, and he says, go do all these things, and eventually through the story, if I remember it correctly, his friends get killed one by one, and he had like this different names for his friends, these Greek names, and they all end up dying, like Euclides and all these other different names, and they die. Each time there's like a trial he has to face. That what he did was pass off a bunch of his work to him, and one of the reasons why he wanted to kill the centaurs, and this actually plays out truthfully. I'm not saying they're all good. I'm not saying they're good at all, but the 3 or 4 stories we've gotten of centaurs have been of them being friendly with children but not hurting them. Now, I don't know if that there's something to that, but in this story, I remember like reading that when he killed the centaurs, the last one he killed was talking to him and his friends and telling him, "You're making a huge mistake," and he killed him. And then he went back and he told Ares, "I did it. I killed him." And then he said, "Go kill the boar man in the woods." He goes and he faces that creature and he kills him. One by one, he systematically destroys the enemies of these gods, basically. These were the outlaws. These were the rogues that had actually were fighting against one of the creatures he fought and killed. And get this, he chases it underground. It's a scorpion man. The scorpion man was actually at war with the minotaurs, and so he chased it underground and it disappeared. That was it. Then Ares is like, "Ha ha ha, you basically, got rid of all my whatever, and these lesser gods are basically spilling blood, and it's creating war. So Ares likes them. He doesn't want them to actually be killed, but he wants to punish one in particular, which was Torgmir, because he got caught and was put in the labyrinth. This is what I remember of this story. And then I remember reading that what ended up happening, Cryptids goes to eventually he makes a deal, and these wolf-headed like Dogman, whatever, they take him to the island. When they get there, the Cretans are there and they fire a bunch of arrows and they kill all these dog-headed creature men, whatever, because they're very neutral in the book. They're very neutral. They're not serving anybody. They're just kind of doing their own thing. But when they get there, they're very angry. The Cretans' army is angry because they know why Cryptids is there. And at this point, he has been given the axe of Ares. So he has the power of the god of war. So he can pretty much slay anybody. So all he does is hold up the axe and protect himself. At this point, he's got one friend with him left, I believe. And he ends up getting an arrow in the throat. And then one of those dog-headed creatures, before he dies, he bites this guy. And he turns into like a werewolf, like a wolf. And I thought, this is just a crazy story. This is really good. So what ends up happening, they go into the labyrinth, and eventually he kills Torgmir, and he brings out his head and he throws it into the fire. And when he does, this huge flame comes up that's shaped like a bull, and then it goes up into the sky. Once that happens, Ares, who is actually on Mars at this time, because that's where he hangs out, is on the red planet. He comes back. Now, if you know anything about the stories or whatever, he's called Mars. It's because it's blood red, and it's the blood of the enemies of Mars. He comes back, and thank you, Jason, for that generous donation. And I'm telling this from memory, folks, and if you ever find the book and you read it and I'm wrong about some of this, don't kill me. Don't shoot me with an arrow. I'm just telling you what I remember, okay? And then I remember reading, and this is a mythological story, right? But anyway, what ends up happening is the god or whatever that dies or whatever, which is one of Mars or Ares, his buddies or whatever, his underlings, he's mad. So then he faces, he comes down to Earth, he goes to Crete, and he faces this dude, Cryptids, and he says, "Give me back my axe." Well, the only way for Ares to have his power back is to take it back. And so he tells him, he goes, "Take it from me." He's like, "I've lost everything." And in fact, he found the bracelet of his son in the
Labyrinth.
in the spiral labyrinth. Yeah, and he says, "This is my son. This is all that's left of him." He's like, he was gone before I even made the deal with you. You knew that. And Ares was like, "Well, tough titty," said the kitty, And so Ares pulls out his second strongest weapon, which I remember is like a sword or something. Oh, it's like a mace. And they start fighting, and eventually he lands a good blow, and Cryptids falls, and he drops the axe, and then Ares picks it up. Well, right before he's about to kill him, Zeus comes down with I think one of the other gods or whatever, and they stop him. And then Ares gets into it with his dad, and then he curses him. And then, of course, Krakatoas has cried out to Zeus, like, why do you bastards? And I remember this in the book. He was saying, why do you bastards let this go on? Why are you allowing this? This is madness, you know? And Zeus is like, madness, you know? And he's like, you know, whatever. This is Olympus or whatever he says. And he kicks him. No, I'm joking. But he comes down, and then there's this somber moment there where he's kind of like, Zeus realizes like, yeah, I'm a piece of crap, and I'm always out screwing around and making these demigod children, and you know, which is probably why the one true God came down and got tired of it, you know, and that was the end of it. But if you look at this story, right, it echoes parts of all these different mythologies. Now, and I remember reading this story, and when me and Anthony talked about it, and we discussed it, and I was like, should I tell that on the show? Because it's not really a story, you know, that was given to us, and it's just something I read, and it's like part of mythology, but it was like somebody's version of it. And I think, if I'm correct, it may have even been a Persian retelling of it. And I think that if you look this character up, I think Krakatoas is actually Rostam. Because what ends up happening is he's spared at that moment, even though he curses Zeus and says, I hate you all. You know, you allow this to go on because of your defiling the earth or whatever. So he leaves, and he goes back to his whatever. He becomes like a mighty dude. Like everybody knows who this guy is, and he becomes famous in his land. And get this, and it does, I think, the reason I think it was a Persian story is because the story of Rostam, and if you go and you read about Rostam, he was from a vassal state of the Persian Empire. Now, the Persian Empire was called the 100-Nation Empire. It had all these nations that paid tribute to them because they had been conquered by the Persians. They were very powerful. And most of Anatolia, which is now Turkey, or Asia Minor, as it was called by the Greeks and the Romans, was conquered by the Persians, and it belonged to them. And so he hails from somewhere in that region. He goes to back to this place where he had met some woman or whatever. Not the Krakatoas, but Rostam. He comes from Anatolia. But Krakatoas returns to go to be with some woman that he had this son with, who was from Anatolia. So his son would have been like half, you know, Anatolian and half Greek, because when they were at war. And I do believe it ties into the story of Troy, which leads, you know, Schliemann, of course, we know Heinrich Schliemann actually found that Troy was real and that there was an actual war there and that it was invaded by the Greeks. Krakatoas was one of the people who fought under Odysseus. That was his general. So he may have been a real guy, and then he stayed behind and he traveled inland. And we think now, a lot of people think that Troy, you know, because it was in the western side of Anatolia, right? So he travels inward, and he meets a woman, and he has a child, and that's how the child ends up getting taken. And he goes back to Sparta. He tries to appeal to the king and says, "Look, I served you in this war. You let my child be taken. You're not going to give me some people to help." And he gives him like these few guys, you know, that are also disenfranchised and angry. You know, because, like I said, they're all pieces of crap, people in charge, and they're all worshiping these demons, right? So they're just like, here, go take them, you know. They're all mad too, you know, take these 10, 12 guys and go get killed, whatever. And so then, you know, he does what he does, and he makes the deal with Ares, and then they almost kill each other. What ends up happening, though, is that when he goes back to Anatolia, his brother, who is very jealous because they tell him, hey, we want to make you the king, whatever. His brother, who's kind of like a sissy boy kind of guy, you know, he's like, well, I'm so weak and frail, you know, but I'm smart, you know. Think of like Scar in Lion King. So what he does is and this is why I think it was a Persian story, because he laid some wreaths down over a pit. And he tricks Rostam into riding his horse over it, and he falls, and he lands on some spikes. But his horse takes the brunt of it. So then his brother, who's being pushed by his followers, they're like, look, you have to kill him yourself. If you let someone else kill Rostam, then it doesn't, you know, or not roast him, but crack a dozen. It looks like, you know, you're weak. So he goes over there and shoots several arrows and finally manages to hit him. The whole time he's climbing up this hillside or whatever, the side of this pit that he's in. He gets out, and then when he gets to the top, he's still trying to get to his brother, who's this little sneaky guy or whatever, his half brother. He stabs him in the neck, and then he falls and he dies, which echoes, you know, the story of Roast Town. Now, I can't remember if it was his brother. I think it was his brother-in-law. It was actually his like wife's brother or whatever. Now, in the story of Roast Town, it's very similar, and it's in the Book of Kings and in the Shahnameh, whatever. And if you go and read that, it's a Persian story where that actually happens the same way. Rostam ends up dying like that. But it's his sneaky little half brother and it's like he's a little turd, and he's too cowardly, so he shoots him, you know, while he's down in the pit, you know. But he doesn't do it in as much of a cowardly way. He just goes up and he shoots him a few times, and he dies, and that's how Rostam died. And he was a real guy, and he actually died that way. But these myths, they become reality, and it becomes a part of our reality. And so whenever you read these stories, and like that one kind of stuck with me, and I hope I told it correctly. And like I said, it was a book which my friend had told me, and he would know. He's all into books. He was like, "You remember that book?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "They made a video game based on that character. It's a guy who makes a deal with the god of war, and he goes and becomes, you know, whatever." I don't. Am I saying that right about the God of Wars? Because I've only played the game like a handful of times.
I've never even played the game, so I don't know.
You
Tony,
have, right?
Tony, do you know?
Well, the story is that he made a deal with Ares, and then Ares betrays him, so he kills his own families. And then Kratos swears vengeance and goes after all the gods, and then slowly he kills Ares and becomes the god of war.
That's what it is. See, and so it echoes this story, but this story was written probably 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, because this story predates literally Thermopylae. So, you know, Thermopylae, I mean, you're talking like, I mean, that goes back before Alexander. What was Alexander, 334 BC?
Yeah.
When was Thermopylae? If somebody could look that up for me. I know that it was like years before that. So, I mean, it was the considered the first invasion of the Greek mainland or whatever. Anyway, that's that story, and I don't know how much validity there is to that. You know, if it is on par with what may or may not have really happened. I just know that it is connected. It's all connected. It's all
480 BC.
480 BC. I wanted to say 440, but wasn't for sure. I just know that it predated Alexander's invasion of Persia by over 100 years. So it would have been 440 something, but it's actually 480. Okay. So yeah, that would have been the first invasion, or maybe it was the second. Was that the first invasion of the Peloponnese, or was that the second?
I think that was the first.
Okay. Because I know that was the second. I believe that was the second. Because the first one. Anyway, this stuff gets, there's so many different stories and legends and whatever, and they get told, and they get retold, and then they get changed and whatever. But there is a video game, and that's
the second war.
It's the second one, right? Yeah, because they had invaded before. Yeah, it was Xerxes, and then Darius was the grandson or the great grandson of. It was a lineage or whatever, and I know that Alexander eventually defeated them. He crushed them. I mean, the Macedonians were very powerful. They totally destroyed the Thebans, who totally destroyed the Spartans. I thought it was funny. I saw somebody wearing that shirt that said, Philip of Macedon. It says, "If we invade you, you will be totally destroyed, utterly destroyed." And then the Spartans' reply was, "If." It's like what if? So in other words, you're conceding that if you invade us, it's going to happen. Like some guy's working out and he's like, "Yeah, man, I got this shirt on, man." And it's like, yeah, okay, but that's a stupid thing, because when the Spartans told Philip that, Philip was like, "Okay," like I'm going to destroy you. I mean, I can pretty much defeat anyone in this whole region. I mean, Alexander and his dad, Philip, they pretty much had the world's premier war machine at that time. They literally, if you look at the Battle of Granicus, folks, now listen to what I'm going to tell you, and you're going to think I'm crazy if you don't actually read this stuff. They managed to muster, the estimates on the low end are about 1 million soldiers, the Persians, with their vassal states and everything else. On the other side was the Macedonians, 40,000 in the Macedonian phalanx, 12,000 of the City League volunteers, which is a measly amount that the other Greeks contributed. They could never agree on the time of day, which is why the Peloponnese continued to be invaded until Alexander took care of it. And then they had 15,000 cavalry, and then they had, there's estimates about how many, maybe 10,000 Thracian, And with those, and then a handful of mercenaries, he defeated the low estimates about 1 million, and then the high estimates 1.5 million to 2 million man army at the Battle of the Granicus, and he defeated them. And then he did it again at the Tigris River, and he did it at Arbela. And this is a cocky guy, Darius III, who sent him a ball to play with because he was a kid, and he said, "Here's a ball, go play with it."
It's in yarn, right?
Huh?
It's in yarn.
No, he sent him a ball. He sent him gold, talents of gold, like a bunch of gold. He said, "I have more than I know what to do with. Take it and go buy a kingdom." And then he sent him a bathtub and said, "Take a bath because you're a dirty barbarian." So Alexander, when he defeated him in the final battle by the Tigris River, he bathed that night in a bathtub made of gold. And he's like, "I don't need your gifts. I'm going to take everything from you." Alexander defeated him. It was the most epic defeat that the world had ever seen, the most epic victory. Because with the high-end estimates, about 60,000 to 70,000 soldiers going up against an army of 1 million to 2 million, that was just in the first battle, and then he did it again and again and again. It was crazy. And then he just kept going. He defeated the Phrygians. He defeated the Egyptians almost without a fight. And he took Tyre, which is the way he took Tyre was unreal. Like to go and burrow under the ocean. Who could do that? We can't even do that now. It's like, I mean, you can, but it takes machinery and all kinds. He was a genius. I mean, he was a genius for war. But anyway, folks, that's not paranormal, but that's history. The crazy thing, though, is when you start to look at these stories and you start to look at these myths, it all kind of comes together. And then when you're sitting there playing a video game in the 2000s, what was it, 2006 when that game came out or something like that, 2005?
Yeah, that was
It's old.
It's an old game.
The first one, anyway. They have newer ones, too.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're playing that game, and my cousin Bo, I had it. I'd barely gotten to play it a few times, and Bo, co-opted it. He just took it and was playing it all the time. And so I was just like, go ahead, play it, whatever. And so when you start looking at these games, in these movies, where do you think they come from? Like it says in the Bible, there's nothing new under the sun. It's all been done before. And God tells us that. It's like, look, this isn't new. You think it's something new, but it's not. It's all been done before.
It's new to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like you go buy a used couch. It's like, wow, this is new to me.
Mm-hmm.
Comes with bed bugs. Oh, I was not aware of that. Thank you.
Look at all this change.
Thank you,
new change.
secondhand store. I need something in my stomach. I haven't eaten all day. The listeners are like, well, you could stand to miss a few meals. Hey! I'm working on that, all right? I've been under a lot of stress. So, folks, I wanted to tell you, though, that those stories. And when we talk on Sunday, I'm going to lay it out there, and I'm going to give you some Dogman stuff. We have a guy who claims that he saw somebody be attacked by a Dogman in New Mexico. New Mexico.
What, did he just sit and watch?
Yeah, he was just eating some Arby's, Subway. He was just like, he's like, eat fresh. Oh, he's doing it too. Hey, cool. Tips his hat to him. Well, see ya. Comes out, he's like, big gulps, huh? Well, see you later. Oh, sorry that happened to you. Woo-hoo. Good thing it's not me. No, he claimed, no, he was, and then there's another guy who was a truck driver in New Mexico. Because after that, I just went ahead and looked in the files in New Mexico, and I thought, man, there's a lot of creepy stuff going on over there. So I went ahead and just found another one, and it was in New Mexico too. So I don't want to make it a New Mexico theme, but it's kind of weird because we were actually going to do the Dogman conference in Roswell. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
But then the airport wasn't going to be close enough, so we're like,
Yeah, we changed it. But
we changed it to Fort Worth, so it's closer for us. I didn't mind the drive out there. I just didn't want to have to not get as many people be able to do it. So anyway, that's going to happen on Sunday. We're going to be here Sunday, and God willing, and we're going to be able to talk to you guys about some Dogman encounters and a couple Skinwalker stories we got. What else do we got? Oh, Scorpion sent me my notes. So let me take a look at this. He sent it to me. Here it is. Yeah, another thing too, man. I had some really creepy ghost stories too, dude. Like this friend of mine gave me some stories. Well, I mean, this guy, his name is Jamal. He's a friend of ours. I've known him for years, and he was a promoter. And my brother worked with him for a little while, but he had worked at Costco, and he got me in touch with a guy who was a DJ who didn't work at our club, but he worked downtown, sort of around the same time I did. His name was Sam, and he had some pretty creepy stories to tell. So we got into some creepy stories there. Yeah, the trucker with the Dogman. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. So, folks, we're going to talk about all that stuff. It's going to come on Sunday. And thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. I'm sorry I prattled on about a fictional story that I read years ago as a kid, and I don't even know if I told it all correctly, but I think I gave you the gist of it. And I was explaining to Anthony that I believe that this is how it's all connected. If you ever get a chance, folks, and I'm going to give you this as a piece of advice or a suggestion, if you ever get a chance to read some of these old books that are out of print, and I've talked with Nick Redfern and Dave Weatherly about this, do yourself a favor and read them, because you may not get another crack at it, and those authors very, very well may be passed on, and they may not ever make another edition of it, and if you have it, hang on to it. I made the mistake of selling half of my book collection, and now I'm out of several out-of-print books. Why are the numbers jumping around like that? A minute ago it was 614, now we're 383. I hate when this thing does that. But anyway, folks, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back on Sunday. Thank you, Mike Turner, for that donation. And, Mike, I will see you at the conference. Everybody who's going to the conference, I'm stoked. I'm ready. We're going to rock this. It's going to be great, and you're going to have a blast. And, folks, I'm telling you, this is your last chance to get tickets. We still have, I think, 13 left for VIP or something like that. So if you go and pick those up, chip, chop, chip. All right, go get those as quick as you can. And if anybody needs, to know any information about the conference,
yeah, actually, now you mention it, T. Cutler asked me, what time does the conference end on Sunday?
The conference ends on Sunday. I would plan to be there till 7.
Okay.
Saturday is 7, but I would plan to be there till 8, because you never know what could happen. Last time we ended up doing it up for a while. Dang it.
Yeah, we kind of hanged. I mean,
we hung.
We
don't say you hanged. We hanged out, folks. Go ahead.
Oh, we hung out.
I knew you were going to say something stupid. Go ahead. Put the camera on you so they can see you being stupid.
We hung out afterwards and just had a good time. We were all talking and stuff. Even still in the conference center, just people leftover people. Even after Elijah gave his speech.
Yeah, turn the camera a little bit because you're off. There it is. You're off camera.
Scoot over.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a really good time, and honestly, I thought everybody was just gonna go immediately afterwards to be like, "Oh, finally we're done. Let's just go to sleep." But
nah, heck no. And there were so many collaborations that came out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Friday, the VIP dinner next Friday, folks, 6 p.m. We'll be there. And I think I'll probably show up early if I were you. Probably start eating about 6:30. You know.
Ooh, speaking of eating, making my stomach.
We haven't eaten at all today. Just been dealing with a bunch of nightmares, bunch of mess. But folks, anyway, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for tuning in and listening, and I hope I didn't mess that story up too bad, and I gave you the gist of it. The point, though, was that all this stuff it all runs together, and the problem to me is that these people at the top, they know this. They have this information. You don't. So it's like they're able to run circles around us because they know that that's the real world and how it really works. They know that these creatures exist. Okay, folks, I'll see you later. Y'all be safe. Good night.